don't know, dude.
Beaten
up by.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I got other things.
I don't know,
people
dude.
breaking into
I
my
like
house.
the
Anyone's
medals
breaking
they
in.
had in Des Moines. What's the
by
name of
a
that tournament
wooden
in Des Moines
hammer
again?
would be crazy.
Muson.
Slam with the ring.
Yeah, their medals are pretty nice.
Hey, I can put on that plastic mask I won in South Bend and break on in myself.
That's true.
Well, the most important one though is how good is the wooden spoon that goes out at the tournaments. Doug always gets his 7-year-old daughter to paint them up and sparkly, all pretty. So like, then if you're at the
Unicorns.
bottom, at least you're getting something.
So
Which
how
is the
many
most
of those
important
do you
thing.
have, Brian?
I have none.
You're not playing Malifaux, right?
Not even from when I started playing, because I think my first tournament I took like 5th,
Hey, Kyle taught us well, right?
pretty much.
I taught you by beating you repeatedly, and then
Yes.
you finally started to get decent.
So is me and Oliver the only ones that are not in your guys' conference?
No,
New England.
We're technically not in Iowa's conference, right?
And I'm in
Yeah,
No,
we're
you're
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes
Lone
still.
Star.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say.
I'm West Coast, so
Yeah.
Playing both.
Sorry.
but I haven't played in a single tournament.
Yeah.
I play in the Virginia and the North Carolina. We travel to North Carolina a lot, actually. So
I'm in the corn state, Ohio. Corn.
and we got a good mix of things as far as that.
Ohio, you could come over to Illinois. We could play.
Dude, so just hop and a skip, right? I just got to jump over Indiana.
Gross. Why would
Dude,
you
I'll
wanna drive
drive.
through Indiana?
I'll drive, dude. I've drove to the old Malifaux's Most Wanted guys in South Bend. I drive up to Michigan whenever the hell that opens back up and actually people start playing again there. I'll go to.
Let me know where to.
Nothing's in Kentucky.
Yeah, I wish the South
Let me know
Bend
where to
people run
contact
more
you. I'll let
stuff.
you know when
That's
we're
a nice
finally holding
drive.
events again.
Dude, I'm down. So I was going to throw a tournament called the Brewmasters Ball this year and a couple months ago, and I had flasks and beer mugs engraved Brewmasters
Ooh.
Ball.
Dude,
That's super cool.
I
had a big mug.
I would travel for that.
I have a big mug for first place, a flask for second place, and a shot glass for third place.
I
And
wanted
that is
to.
the perfect prizes.
Yeah.
Dude. Well, I'll let you go. It's gonna go next year. Hopefully the lady didn't engrave the date because then I'm
Yeah.
screwed. And but those are the three things, and I have a Kirai, somebody was selling something, so I just buy dumb stuff. I have a Kirai keyword painted that I bought, and I was gonna put that as a raffle prize. And
I would go for that. I need more painted Oh no, I have the
You
Karai is never
Dayglow.
Dayglow. Never mind. That
I'll
counts
let
as
you guys
painted.
know. I'll let you guys know because it's a big glass beer mug and it's gonna have Brewmaster's Ball on it. So
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm coming for it.
Yeah, I
I-
definitely. Me and Landon would
fit
drive
20.
over.
I can fit
Definitely.
20 in this. I rented a hall, so it's $20. But I rent a hall.
It's pretty good.
I'm supplying all
20
the
something.
food, and I'm a henchman, but I can't run an event when freaking COVID's around. So
Yeah.
I hear you.
but I'll let you
One
guys
day or
know.
2 day.
It's gonna be to be determined.
Mhm.
All right, so
That's
real
a fair
quick.
response.
Okay, and I know it's 9:31. So real quick, who do you think? So, what do you think? 25% U.S. Faux Tour is going to happen or not? I've been talking to Craig.
Like the big event? No.
We're
it's not gonna
screwed.
happen.
I know it's
It's
not
not.
going to happen, but that's why I was like, about 10% it's going to
No.
happen.
Didn't he
No
already say
comment.
it was going to be delayed?
No comment
was
because I know the
happening.
actual
I
haven't
answer.
officially done
Not public knowledge. No,
Yeah. Everyone's assuming it's going to get pushed back.
It's going to get crushed unless
like
the cure happens.
I would
in 2
hope
days.
they have the big tournament in the spring, so it's not a full year wait, but
Hey, that's fine by me. I need to get more points in. Our last 2 tournaments were about one guy short of scoring. So
Yeah.
oh.
Just
you
a
gotta
heads
come
up,
to
guys.
Iowa.
I had law school things.
It looks
Alright.
like I got a notice that the chat was not working initially, so we just want
Is
to
the
double check on that.
chat not working?
All right, I should pull this up on YouTube. I can look at the chat.
You want to watch yourself?
Great.
Watch yourself.
I wanna read the chat.
You're like,
Somebody
I'm a man
responded.
of the people.
Oh,
Oh,
perfect.
yeah.
Okay,
Did you guys
sweet.
say you were going to
Yeah.
link that in the group chat as well?
Oh yeah, I can go ahead and link the for you guys to if you want to see the
I got it.
loop or whatever. Okay, thank
that's
you.
fine. I found it already.
yeah, if you click the top left where it says live on YouTube, that can take you to the link.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Oh, cool.
Yeah, thank you,
We're learning. We're learning here.
dude. I don't know Jack, man. I
All
can tune
right.
in a satellite, but
So, welcome everybody that's joining us. We are here to answer your questions. So, we have some people that already sent questions in. So, we're going to start with some of those. And Brian's going to be the primary and the finder and asker of the questions for the most part. And we have everybody should be labeled as their faction. So, if we have a specific question regarding a certain faction, we'll try to throw it to that person, and then we'll give everybody else a chance if they want to throw anything else in. Maybe they play against that faction a lot or something like that, so they have a lot of experience with it. And we'll kind of go around things that way. So Brian, if you want to start us off, just kind of looking at, I believe Freeman had a couple questions. If you want to start,
Well,
one of those.
I should say, who do we have here? Who is everyone?
Oh, yes,
how about
I
we
guess
do
that's a good.
quick
Yeah,
introductions.
let's introduce people.
Name, faction, and conference for our faux tour friends who are competing.
So let's
Yeah.
start with Chris.
hey, my name's Chris. I'm from the Great Lakes Conference. I play primarily Bayou and Thunders. I was actually on Third Floor Wars, and I was the guy that was the Wong quote-unquote expert, and hence why Wong is king. Yeah, thanks, Oliver. Appreciate you, buddy.
No problem. No problem.
So why don't we just go to you, Oliver?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name's Oliver. I'm known for playing Ma and Somer. I did the Ma episode for Craig, along with a couple others. We'll probably be doing a Somer episode at some point in the future. I think the old Somer episode was recorded, but like it got scrapped due to the audio being messed up or something. I work or play in the DC conference, whatever that's called, and then also in the Carolinas. We live right on the border between them, so we travel to both.
Nice. Longton, who are you?
I'm Longton. I'm in the Great Lakes area, particularly Chicago. I predominantly played Yan Lo, and I've also been playing the other Reserve Masters a decent
Occasionally.
amount lately.
Occasionally.
A lot more lately, but Yan Lo is still just in a really good spot, I believe, and I don't think the nerfs really hurt him that much at all. But
Don't
yeah,
forget Riva.
the fact that Riva is a lot better, I really appreciate. I think that actually really mattered for her card and her. I mean, her crew doesn't really matter, but her card is really good now, which makes her playable.
All right, so Landon, you're also in the Chicago area.
That's correct. Longton and I played on the setup phase for, I believe, the first one you guys did there, our
Yep.
Riva versus McCabe matchup. So yeah, I played Neverborn in M2E, started with Collodi, played basically only Collodi, since what else do you need? And then switched over to 10 Thunders as of 3rd edition since my boy Lynch was moved over, and that was what I was playing at the time in M2E towards the end of it. So
And you couldn't play Collodi anymore.
yeah, and they killed Collodi, so didn't have all too much choice there. But no hard feelings there. Weird. Thunders is a great faction, so now I have an excuse to play it.
And sticking along the bottom, we go way to the other side of the country, and we go with Hingle.
Yeah, I'm here in the West Coast Conference, here, California specifically. 2 East, traveled around the country a lot, ended up going to England for ITC. Took a bit of a break as 3E started getting together, so have jumped right back into it now, and then Shelter in Place hit. Will say I was not at LVO and am embarrassed by the West Coast showing and letting the Texans come in and take all our prizes.
It was too
That ain't
easy.
happening next year. Not
Texas
going to
crushed.
let that happen next year.
All right, and then we have Jesse.
Hey, yeah, so Jesse Ellis, I'm from the New England Conference, playing primarily Bayou. You'd recognize me from the Third Floor Wars Ophelia episode, and then I also did the Brewmaster versus Sandeep setup phase episode where I got utterly crushed by stupid fucking Arcanists. Yeah, I know, right?
Dirty
Good. Pretty
terrorists, man.
Yeah.
True
Yeah,
third
it was
quarter
brutal.
sentiment.
Crazy.
Way to let us down, dude.
Justice
Way to let us
Warriors. What are you talking about?
And yeah, actually, kind of keep an eye out because my buddy Adam Talbot and I have a new podcast that we're going to be starting, probably recording tomorrow if we can swing it. Boring Conversation.
Nice.
So
Nice.
we'll see how that goes.
All right, and last but not least, we have the Texas Lone Star meta.
Hey there, my name is Andre. I, up through GG0 and M2E, played Nikima. I say Nikima because Lilith was just an excuse for me to play Nikima, and I was overjoyed when she became a master. And you might recognize me from taking first place at LVO and having that path to podium. I was also on the GG1 thoughts, and there's, as of yet unreleased, of course, Nikima deep dive. But beyond that, I've also been playing a lot of Stuck recently because he's good.
Stuck.
Yeah.
Really good, I hear.
Yeah, he's
It's
exceptional.
just a wee bit.
So are they going
And-
to change the Las Vegas Open to the Texas Open now? Is that what they're going to do?
Well, you know, West Coast forgot to show up, so I feel like we
Yeah.
had to take one up for them and give it a good show.
Maybe they have
as
their
soon
alarm
as soon as
clocks
things
on.
open up, I got a lot of buddies in Texas,
Yeah.
so no matter what
Mhm.
city, I'm showing up to get a little payback.
Better go to Texas. Bring your cowboy hats and your belt buckles.
All right. Then, of course, we have me and Brian, your host of Schemes and Stones, me being Arcanist. And now switching to Guild, I have a few games of Guild, but I'm not an expert, but I've been doing a lot of research on them. And we have Brian, who's been, of course, Outcast and trying out Rezzers a little bit.
Starting the plunge into a terrible, dirty faction, but it's cooler than what I have right now. So gonna start playing some Cry and see how that goes.
Yeah, pick one of the broken ones. That's the way to
Yeah,
go.
solid vengeance.
She's fun.
Wait, but Brian, isn't that your most hated faction?
Oh no, 10 Thunders has always been my most hated faction.
You mean Shaman?
But yeah, pretty much. But I have a lot of the Cry stuff because of my boy Daw. So it's a natural. I think I have a couple Dayglow Cries sitting around somewhere too. So might as well finally use them.
So Brian becomes Rezer Scum. I see how it is.
That's all right.
I mean-
let
I was
him
surprised
play
too.
Riva. No worries.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the questions. So as we started earlier, we had a couple of people asking questions in the forum or the Weird Place Facebook questions. So if we want to start there.
Yeah, so our first one is just how do you prepare for a major tournament? What's your general thought process behind your list building? You know, what's a core model versus your tech pick for the counter matchup or the strats and schemes you're looking at seeing?
All right, so let's just kind of start from the top and then kind of go around if other people want to chime in.
Yeah.
As a general rule, so we don't over talk each other, if you have something you really want to say, you can do like a hand raise kind of thing just to let us know. It's like, okay, such and such wants to talk about this, so we can throw it around. But let's just start with Chris. So from tournament prep, what do you do to start prepping for a tournament?
Basically, you pick 3 models, your most strongest models, ones that will basically give you a big array of different strats and schemes. Most of the tournaments I've been seeing and I've been going to actually have where you actually know what the 3 strats and schemes are.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't ever want to limit yourself to one master, because if you drop against Levy, you know, somebody says Outcast and you're worried about Demise, then you don't want to be like, well, I only brought one master and Levy is my counter, even though Levy took a big nerf, which I'm super happy. Or Rusty
It was a
is
little
lady.
nerf.
It's rusty. It's rusty.
It was a little nerf.
But primarily I take 3 masters. You don't want to take your whole entire bag unless you have some painting competition, which I think you should use the models that you play with for your painting instead of, you know, worrying about all the dust or whatever from just only painted models that you use for your show. But primarily, you don't want to overload everything. You want to make sure you got your tokens. I bring 2 fate decks because I have a little superstition that if you have the same fate deck as me, then I always change it right out the gate. Make sure you have just basically, I have this little toolbox that has all my markers, piano markers if I run zip, and Maws, you know, pit trap markers and everything. Just make sure you have everything there, and measuring tape, of course. I don't use widgets, but I'd like to try to use them eventually, but I just think it's too much clutter. But primarily, just the main thing you want to do is don't bring some giant bag with wheels on it to make sure you have everything. You got to go with your most comfortable master. if you look at the board first and see the board, then you don't want to have only a shooty crew and somebody literally took every single piece of terrain they could find and put it on one board. That would be my suggestion.
Oh, and as Hingle reminded me, just as an FYI, you can instead of putting your hand up, there's a reactions thing where you can just put your thumb up like that. So you can do that if you
there
want
we
to
go.
talk.
Yeah,
So-
but I couldn't figure out how to get it to go away.
Yeah, how you get it to go away?
I think you just hit it again, right?
Let's
you just
find
leave
out.
it up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you just
hit it again.
double
There you go.
tap.
Perfect. That's perfect.
Andre, I saw you flag. What do you got?
For preparing for a tournament, for me, the thing that I always try to do the most of is just get as many practice games in as I possibly can on the crew I want to bring. I differ in how I approach games in that I try to bring a crew that I feel can tackle anything as long as I play it well. So as LVO as an example, I only took one specific crew build and I used it for all 5 games because my theory was that if I am so consummately, intimately familiar with that build, I should be able to play even around what the crew is weak into, and obviously it worked. But the thing that I think is most important in terms of whether or not you're able to win a matchup is be familiar with what your opponent might bring, because if you get bamboozled, then that's on you. But more than that, be also really familiar with all the ins and outs of what crew you decide to bring, because I think you'll surprise a lot of people, especially if you don't bring like the most, Cheese Lord 9000 kind of crew. But if you're really, really good at what you do, that can often blindside people. So that would be my recommendation for preparing for a tournament.
Anybody else with the thumbs? All right, Oliver, you want to go?
Yeah, so I think for me, my first and main focus is on first picking what masters have the easiest time with what schemes. So when I look at an event and I say, okay, this is round 1, the first thing I want to do is say what schemes here are the easiest possible completion, and then try and design my masters around that. A lot of the time when you're going to an in-person tournament, and this is a drum I'm going to beat until it's not an issue, you hit 3 turns, sometimes 4, occasionally 5. So if you're looking at a game in that context, then schemes are significantly more important than strategies. Schemes give you 4 points, strategies give you 2. So if you're going into a game with that understanding, yes, it's important to be able to complete the strategy. However, it is vital that you are able to slam both of your schemes on turn 3 and turn 2 in order to score your max points and try and get a 6 point. If you have that as your focus, it makes it significantly easier to then kind of just put that on the back of your mind, let that kind of just run as its own program, and then from there try and like stop your opponent from doing their strategy or their schemes. Again, I think that what was said as well, just about being super familiar with your masters, is super important. I play Somer, I play Ma, and occasionally I'll bring Zip. Those are the 3 masters I bring 99% of the time. If you see me put someone else on the table, it means I have a ton of practice with that person, and I no longer have to like think about basic actions, because really you have to pay attention to how much fatigue you're having throughout a day. You really have to be cognizant of the fact that you are human. You're not going to be drinking as much water as you should. You're not going to be eating as much as you should. Like, all of these things are going to affect how you play. So you want as little mental fatigue or mental load on you as possible going to an event. So you don't just like miss the fact that you didn't use an AP to score this turn on your master when you easily could have, because you're playing Colette, but you've only played her 4 times.
You
Things
keep
like
forgetting
that.
to push after throwing an upgrade to somebody.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
happened a lot.
Simple,
yeah.
like the simple stuff, right? You want to get to a point where crunch takes over most of the simple decision making, and then you're just making the complex choices. You're trying to set up the weird plays or the things that are non-linear.
Jesse, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, it kind of plays off of one of the things that Oliver just said, was making sure that you get your reps in with your masters before you go, and making sure you pick masters that are maybe a little better at handling a variety of situations. There are some masters out there that just have their, there's a crew that'll have their number out. Lots and lots of hard counters. You really got to think hard about taking a master like that into a big event, because the further you climb up that chain of players, the more likely somebody's going to know exactly what they need to do to disassemble your crew. And you need to be able to plan around that. A good example of that in Bayou is Ulix. Ulix, when he's running on all cylinders, he's freaking terrifying to play against. But if somebody knows how to handle his crew and can attack the right models and attack the willpower and jam you up with terrain or make it hard for you to move around, your game is going to go from like an 11 to like a 4, even if you know the crew backwards and forwards. So really knowing the limitations of your crews, I think, is a big deal.
Yeah. So moving on then, and this is still tied with, kind of your game plan somewhat. Bluffing your scheme choices. When and how are you carrying out that task?
So let's start with the bottom then. So Landon, I know you're wanting to talk a little bit. What do you feel about bluffing?
Ooh, I'd say it really depends on the context of the scheme. There are certain things like Hidden Martyrs. I'd say you should do your best effort when list building to make sure you can put an effort to bluff that. But if it was something more like, say, Sabotage, I'm not going to bluff Sabotage. If I'm bluffing Sabotage, I can score it already, right?
Right.
So I should just taken it. But so it depends on some context. Like GG0 had Power Ritual, where I think it was pretty reasonable to expect you could drop a scheme marker in your deployment zone. But generally speaking, I'd say most schemes you probably shouldn't bother bluffing per se. But I would.
It costs
there's
activations
context.
mostly.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you point out Hidden Martyrs, you can do it in list building and probably get value out of whatever you just did. But dropping a bunch of schemes to bluff something, those are actions that could have been used to score or deny.
Right.
Well, especially in 3E where focus is just, it's like, oh, I have a dead action. Should I drop a scheme marker and bluff something, or should I just take focus? And now that it stays around, there's almost very little reason not to just take focus unless the model is truly not going to ever do anything.
Right. 100% agree. I think it's really difficult to consider the value of bluffing an opponent who is like, if you're spending mental load to try and take an action that may or may not even result in something, so your opponent may or may not like make different decision points based off of it. A lot of the time, your opponent's not going to think that deep, right? Sure, you can play in a vacuum against a perfect opponent who's going to consider all factors, but your opponent is likely focused on the things they're going to be focused on anyways, and either they're not going to notice your bluff, or they're just going to make the decision that is most AP efficient and or action focused and beneficial to that action focus as possible. If you look at other games like Magic or other card games that are also competitive, the vast majority of the time, they discourage you heavily from bluffing because A, it costs mental load to yourself, and B, it doesn't really matter that much. You're looking at thousands of a percentile of like actual value difference, in games like Magic, where over years and years, yes, there are instances where you are playing the toppest tier player against the toppest tier player, and one person is setting up a position to be in one place versus another. You are probably not in that game. When I played against Steve in the semifinals of Nova last year, there were a couple instances where we were both taking bluff actions or actions to kind of imply that we had things. That's probably the last time that's mattered, right, in a game. And I think he's like a crazy good player.
Yeah, I think that it really depends on the person across the table. If you know the person, I think bluffing becomes more of a thing. If you don't know the person, you don't know how they're going to respond to that. Like, you don't know if they'll take it. You don't know if they'll just completely ignore it. Like, if I'm playing Landon, I will bluff everything because he will fucking sit there and try to calculate all the things and be like, okay, wait, can he do that? Can he do that? Could he do that? As I know he will do that. But against most other people, it's like, half the time I try to bluff something and I end up like, damn, I should have just took it because I could have easily got those points. And instead now I have this other scheme that I'm going to struggle to get a point on.
Right. Exactly.
Which I think also goes to the counterpoint of bluffing, which is like, how much should you try to actively play around your opponent's schemes?
Right.
And a good chunk of the time, it's also, at least in my opinion, a good chunk of the time, it's just worth it to do your own thing, because then at worst you're going to tie if you play optimally. But most of the time, especially with some strategies where you can't both score it, you're going to end up winning just because you're hammering hard your path and you're forcing them to follow it instead of just constantly being like, oh, what are they doing? Like, don't get me wrong, especially like end game scoring, there's a lot more. There's a lot more actually playing around when you get things like take prisoner and just anything that says end of game. But for the most part, throughout most of the game, just go and do your own thing.
You should almost always be the person asking the questions, not the person responding to them. And if you play a proactive game plan, the vast majority of the time you're going to be in the lead. So you can then take your time to deny your opponent in comparison to being the person who's like, okay, man, he's already done X, Y, and Z. Now I'm down points, so I have to answer that, and I also have to do the things I'm doing. So you're in a back foot to try and play catch up to either try and get the draw, or you're just losing, right? So like none of those are good positions. So if you're ever in a spot where you're like, man, I can either score or I can like try and potentially deny something that may or may not exist, you score every time. It doesn't matter. Always do it.
Yeah, I mean, once you fall behind on points, it puts so much more mental load on you. To Oliver's point, that now you're trying to worry about denying and scoring what points you still can, if you can even win at that point. So
Right.
it's a bad spot to be in.
Yeah, but I find I try to deny schemes just through my natural play. So if you're bluffing me, I'm probably not noticing.
Right.
To be blunt, you're trying to bluff claim jump. I'm probably trying to deny you claim jump anyways. Doesn't matter. It's an easier one to try to deny unless you go hard. I just oftentimes I just don't notice when people are bluffing. Other than again that power ritual, that the ski marker in the corner that everybody dropped on the first turn. It's just like, okay, whatever. In GG1, I'm just thinking about choosing 2 or 3 schemes just to deny, and it doesn't matter.
Mm.
And maybe it's killing models too.
Easiest way to do it, right? Just wipe them
well.
off the table. So moving on with the current state of Malifaux being, we're not allowed to see each other and play in person. Vassal is now kind of like the go-to way to play Malifaux because social distancing. So do you guys treat Vassal as just a good practice tool to use as like, well, I gotta play to, keep in on it? Or is it like an actually good way to simulate the role-playing minis game and be competitive with it? We have the Vassal World Cup is going on right now. Is Vassal like a good way to do competitive Malifaux?
I've got opinions on this. So
yeah, go ahead.
I think Vassal is really beneficial when you're trying to see things from a different angle. Like I would not have cracked Somer the way I have without playing games on Vassal and getting a visual representation of how the auras work, how Bigger Hat and all that other stuff, like all work, and Bayou Bash all work. Mm-hmm. With that said, I despise Vassal. I hate it more than anything else. I do not like playing on it because games take considerably longer. You can't shorthand actions or shorthand like motions. I can't say, okay, I'm moving here, here, and here, point 3 places, tell you my intent is X, Y, and Z, and then pass back to you while I move and fidget with my models.
Or better, you move the model, you're like, oh, it doesn't work there, let me back it up, and the model vanishes, and you're just like, son of a...
Yeah, it just takes so much time. I will do it for my friends who ask, and they actually, like, they really want it. Yeah, I mean, I'm playing in the Vassal World Cup, and that's been awesome. I met Christian out of... I want to say he's from Western Europe. And he was super awesome. Like we shared some recipes and stuff. Super cool guy. And it was fantastic to be able to play against someone from Europe in that regard. But man, I despise it. Like I'll help my friends playtest on it. I'll use it to try and crack Ulix because I think Ulix may be the same kind of level as Somer. But again, if you're not getting value added out of it, trying to like see like an aura-based master to understand them, I don't want to fucking touch it. I'm going to be really honest.
Jesse, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so, I mean, the thing with Vassal is, like, to a certain degree, it's almost like playing a different game. And it definitely has its benefits and its drawbacks. I mean, the benefits Oliver's already kind of talked about. It's easier to get accustomed to certain types of crews. Some of the drawbacks are, it can be really difficult to clearly see whether or not you're moving around terrain because of the way that some of the terrain works and some of the spread out forests and stuff. It's like, am I in the terrain? Am I out of the terrain? It isn't really that clearly defined. The other thing I found on Vassal is that it's a lot easier to give your opponent tells on there, because you can't just measure stuff on the sly.
Right.
If you do anything, even if it's like, oh hey, we turned off the deployment lines, and now I need to see where the center line is for the board, or I need to see where the center point is, so I know if my leave your mark scheme marker is close enough. As soon as you start fiddling with that stuff, your opponent's like, oh, okay, he must have leave your mark, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it certainly has
Kind of
its
like
benefits.
before all the marked up maps.
Yeah, exactly.
Before the lines.
Exactly. So I mean, now we're spoiled with Maps by Mars and all those other vendors that sell some great pre-marked maps. I enjoy playing on Vassal. I wouldn't turn it down, but I would always prefer to play live, and I think I'm pretty sure everybody is probably that way. So that's not great news.
Andre, what you thinking?
I'm actually in the other camp. I feel like Vassal lets us do a lot of things that we can't do in real life, namely play crews that I don't own. I'm sure you can always proxy, but everything becomes a lot more readable because I don't have to own, Hinamatsu or all the pigs or whatever if I just want to give some crew I'm unfamiliar with a whirl. On top of that, it also makes measuring a lot more precise.
Yeah.
I always feel very, as I watched opponent half-ass measure across a board, and they'd be like, yeah, it's probably close enough. And you're like, okay. But in Vassal, it's like, nope, here's a 5-inch aura. This is 5 inches, damn it. And that's how far you're going to move. And that is a lot cleaner for me to work with, I would say. The other part of that is, I think the only thing I really miss about the tabletop is the face-to-face interaction with an opponent. I think obviously it's a game, it's fun to play with other people and all that fun stuff. But I also think that the aspects of Vassal in that it's all digital. Like as soon as I'm done playing a game of Malifaux, I got to put all the terrain away, the boards away, the models away. Did I drop Nikima again during that game? That kind of stuff. Whereas Vassal, it's like, all right, cool, I'm done. I click the X, everything's put away.
Sure.
So there's a lot of convenience, I would say, with Vassal. And then the last point that I wanted to make about Vassal that I really like that can't really happen in person is you get to play against I played against Russians who are like, yeah, let's play. And it's 1 o'clock in the morning and I can throw down. We struggle to share languages, but dang it, we can play Malifaux. And so that's really cool to me, especially with the Vassal World Cup. I've played against New Zealanders and, the British folk and all that fun stuff. And I feel like that's only possible because of Vassal, and it should get its due for that.
Yeah. The connectiveness of human to human connection is value added. I wouldn't have met Christian and talked to him about his view of American politics from a European perspective for 2 hours, and then talking about French cooking. That wouldn't have happened without Vassal, and Vassal's cool for that, right? I made a connection with another human being that I wouldn't have made outside of it. That said, I despise the autistic crunch of the format. I hate it. I hate having to fiddle with everything and have it all be so terrible.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Landon.
I'd say to finish off this question, Landon, take it. Because I know you just played your cup game earlier today.
So I want to kind of mirror Andre's perspective on things in that Vassal is very useful for a couple of different things. One, it lets us play with things we don't own, right? Andre said that was very useful. And David and I actually have a friend who doesn't actually own a single Malifaux model, but I get great games of Vassal on with him. And so that's a very beautiful thing to be able to try and drag more people into the game who might be edged out by, either the pricing of it or just being able to actually get out to a store. And then secondly, the precise measurement of it, you're never going to get that level of precision in a meat space game. but it's very helpful for getting you to practice and build your stack when you're learning a new crew. And I think Oliver
true.
was
Yeah.
referring to this when he was saying, you know, I'm going to crack Wong or Ulix, I'm going to crack Sommer, and that it really helps you build your stack for turn one. It's something that I think gets discussed a reasonable amount when you're trying to, you know, suggest how someone learn a new master. You want to figure out exactly your game plan as far as how you want to set up and unbox, right? So having that level of precision and measurement, like, oh, this is how I want to position this and that, it's sometimes hard to eyeball that when you're just setting it up on the table. But with Vassal, you can get the auras up. And once you practice it a few times there, it can translate pretty well to the table, I think.
Okay. So next question, I want everyone to pick one master. So question, which master in each faction is most in need of support, either through changes to GG or just extra models, whatever it is? I'm going to put a caveat on this. It cannot be a master that you're like in your faction. It has to be someone you're facing, someone you're seeing who needs support. Because obviously it's so easy to like complain about my Von Shield needs to get better. Like the stuff you see that you're playing against or aren't playing against, what needs to get improved. Mike, you want to start?
Yeah. I'm gonna pick a guild one, but I also play guild as well, so that'd be
well,
unfair.
no, you don't really play guild.
I dabble in guild. So I'm gonna go with two of my regular opponents play Rezzers, and I'm gonna go with McMorning. How about that? You know, he can use a little bit of touching. He's not that far off, but he can use a little love, a little coddling.
What would you
change
add?
One thing, what would you improve?
Yeah, it's I think it's almost a common trap. I think just to shove him in and he goes down like as fast as possible because people think he's invulnerable. I do love flesh constructs. I think that they're of value, but the rest of the crew probably can use a little bit of a buff.
Okay. Longton, where are you at?
See, I've been debating this because it's you know, making it outside the faction makes it like decently hard to think, oh,
yeah,
who do I actually think is like worse? But so I also played a little bit of Arcanist, so that's like my second-ish faction for 3E at least. And I love Raspy. I think she might not be in the worst spot right now, and I've definitely seen on the forums even recently saying, I think I saw someone say, Raspy is really good, you just don't know how to play it properly. And that, you know, honestly might very well be true, but every time I've seen it on the table, it just seems just slightly subpar.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And I think that's because the one change I want is, as great it is like controlling the board and other things, I think some of its beefier, stronger models just need movement tricks.
Sure. Yeah.
I feel like that's actually partially what's holding it back is all the good, strong models you want to do with damage take too long to get to where I want them to be. The few times I got to play her early on. And
So
there's no point controlling the board because there's no payoff.
Yeah. Now I have a question because you got Rezzer next to your name. Do you play McMorning?
I don't play McMorning. I don't like. Yeah. We have a lot of great Rezzer masters, and honestly, McMorning just doesn't really like fit my. I don't even want to say like play style. I just don't like his fluff as much. The whole poison thing. I like the whole. I just like my other masters better, but yeah, I definitely think McMorning is probably in the worst spot of Rezzers. I think that's pretty easy to say.
I think the master is probably really good, but his crew does not do the things that it needs to actually justify. Because he's very strong, right? Like he's an exceptional model just on his own, but the crew itself is not doing the things that it's too Roos Goldsberg, right? It's the same reason Brewmaster is kind of awkward.
That's a great way to put it. It's you got to do all this stuff to set up on the first turn. It's like you haven't even left your deployment zone. And I know there's a lot of masters that there are this first turn things you got to all do this stuff, but they don't advance what they're trying to do. So they're already playing a turn behind
He's a one-shot pony. That's all McMorning is a one-shot pony. So I don't think he can do multiple things. I think he's a good killer, and that's about it.
So Chris, would there be master who isn't in your played faction that needs an improvement, what would it be?
That's a tough one. Wish I had more than
Get
2
put on the
seconds.
spot. I was
Yeah.
the first one
I'll
on this
just
one.
say-
It's like, oh,
yeah,
come
listen,
on.
all right. Well, I have 2 seconds.
I'm not going to make this easy on you guys.
No, it's fine. A master that needs a boost, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I got one if he needs a minute to think.
Hamlin needs a boost.
Okay.
Hamlin is, if I have 3.5 hours to play a game, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But he needs, I don't know if somebody just needs to pilot him. I don't know if Duncan's brother needs to say, you know what? I broke him before. Let's do it again.
Mhm.
Let's do another rat joy bomb or something crazy. But Hamlin, he needs a shot just to speed him up, speed up his whole process. I don't have any outcast players. Well, besides Tara and Levy in Ohio here. So, but I've been doing a research. I try to find all the masters, what the pros and cons are, what's their linchpin, that if I can remove that linchpin, then you are playing Mr. Ketchup the entire time while I'm running my schemes and laughing and having you behind.
Yeah.
But Hamlin, it seems like, all right, well, like Oliver said, most time like turns end, turn 3, turn 4, cool.
Right.
Unless it's turn 5, I don't care, because I have a taxidermist that makes Nyx a stuffed pig, and then your link's broken. But I haven't heard anything from Hamlin. I haven't heard anything about Vix, because Levy exists. So somebody needs to give these other masters a flag or something saying, hey, I'm over here. I can do stuff too. Levy just, if like all the models are dead, then I'm going to go run my schemes with my necropunks, because necropunks are king. That's what makes Levy work. If Levy did not have necropunks, he would have to murder everybody and hope turn 4 he can start doing stuff. It's in my opinion. I know somebody's like, "Yo, you're nuts because you think Wong's great." I was like, "Well, necropunks. If Levy didn't have necropunks, he would not be where he is right now." That's all
fair.
I'm saying.
Totally agree.
Kyle, where's your improvement?
All right. Well, there was the one we talked about yesterday, and this is more, the problem is, like, this is more of a missed opportunity because I feel like it would take a lot of redoing. So this is not a realistic one, but I think the whole Terra, how she operates, they should have, instead of doing fast, they should have made it slow. So it was an opportunity cost. You put slow on the enemy, and then you have to choose to, like, do I keep you slow, or do I rip the slow off to actually pull in my summon or something like that? Then it's an actual choice. It's not like this weird, like, I don't want to give the thing fast because that's going to put me in a bad position if you have fast. Now I have to put it at certain spots. I think that would have been a cleaner use for her. And then you won't have Cody, who would be still bitching constantly. And you're welcome, Cody. My toes feel perfectly fine right now, though, about the Aeonius nerf that I suggested, and it went through.
Yeah, I think Terra is a tricky model because she's either, so obviously I think Cody's the only Terra player. I'm not sure if anyone else plays her.
I mean, I did back.
Just want to confirm that real quick. So no one else can play her. So I'm gonna, actually concede to him saying whether she's in a good place or not. She is not playable because Cody says she's not playable, and he's the only one who can play her. With that said, I agree that there shouldn't be a master where literally one person in America can actually play her in a competitive nature. That means she's either too complex or she's not doing things in a normalized enough path that people can actually make decisions on her. Because literally, he's like, anyone else puts Terra on the table, I'm like, sweet, they don't know what they're doing, I'm going to crush them. Like, he puts her on the table, I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably losing because this master is hyper broken, and she's going to summon but also have 4 extra actions over me and activate 4 or 5 models after I've completed all my models.
Well, apparently that's impossible now.
Right, which you can still do to a certain extent, but it's not hyper broken like it was before.
You need a suit now, or
and
soulstone.
And so now, because it's not in that hyper broken state, it's clear that was the only linchpin keeping the rest of the crew above water. So it's like, that's not good, right? Like, we don't want a crew where, okay, this model's broken, we nerfed it, and now the crew's unplayable. That's not a good design space. So I definitely agree there. I think Tara
So-
could
Well,
use a buff.
the
A
problem
redesign,
with her was she had an almost auto win GG0
Right.
strat at the time too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so they didn't need to nerf both.
Yeah,
So,
and-
Jesse,
you want to get into the? Well, I was going to jump to. I know Oliver was bit. We had a little conversation when we were doing the test about Wong. Do you have any suggestions how to fix Wong? Because I know you kind of went off on that.
So I think that the fix for Wong is a few things. The main issues with Wong, just to catch everyone up on the argument that you guys weren't here for. In Magic the Gathering, there's a card called Browbeat. It says, I'm going to give you an option. You can either take 5 damage or I can draw 3 cards. So I'm giving my opponent the choice. That means I'm always getting the worst of the 2 choices because my opponent will always pick whatever is better for them, not better for me. So it is always the worst of both options. So it is lesser than both options in any given context. That's something to keep in mind. Wong functions in the same way because Wong puts a marker down and it says, okay, you're going to flip off the top. You could just win. Doesn't matter. Right? And then there is no decisions. Or you can choose to cheat or not choose to cheat. You're only going to ever cheat when it's actually very relevant to you, or you have no cards. If you have no cards, I'm winning anyways, so therefore it's win more. So really there's no decision point or decision access where it is good for me.
Isn't that shockwaves in general?
Yeah,
all shockwaves.
shockwaves are a problem.
Yeah, shockwaves are inherently bad design. We're not touching that. Sorry, Weird. They're bad. Get rid of them. Get them out of the game. The second thing is that Wong hurts his own models. He is a Ruse Goldsberg machine as well. He has to do a bunch of nonsense in order to give his models fast after eating all of his Master's AP activations, not doing anything, and then all of his subpar models, which are now wounded, have an extra AP, but they're not really doing anything with it because they don't actually have actions that have hyper value. So those are all the issues with Wong. What I would do to change that, I wouldn't buff the shockwaves because shockwaves getting 2 buffed then creates the opposite issue where nothing you do matters. I'm just putting questions down and then you can't really flip it and be successful. Instead, I would probably focus more on his picking up schemes and putting them all over the board in weird places, and kind of make that a focus of it and basically like picking up schemes and putting them down in weird ways. I would also make his models tankier and then remove his like hurting my own people to do things. And just give him like lightning bolts, dude. Like he's a wizard. Let him fucking magic missile people. Come on.
For sure. Jesse, where you at?
Baseline lightning, mother.
Yeah, so I won't go on a Wong tirade because Oliver already kind of talked about everything I would say with him.
Yeah. Jesse and I've talked about this a lot.
We talked about Wong a lot.
Not your faction, guy.
Yeah, not your faction.
Not my faction, Savage.
I made the rule.
I know.
I'm moderating this.
So-
you gotta respect it. Come on.
I got
Right.
asked
So
directly.
here's the
not
deal.
my fault.
Oliver did
I blame
actually
Kyle
get
on that.
directly asked how
Yeah.
he would fix
I
Wong.
mean, that's fair.
Yeah, Kyle
That's
broke
fair.
your rules, Brian.
I
Broke your rules.
know. I'm gonna
I
have
can
to
do
kick
that.
I'm gonna have to
We're
kick him out
Bayou. We
now.
don't follow the rules. We're Bayou. We make
Yeah,
our
that-
own.
for real.
That true.
Call it a day.
For
Jesse,
a model
what do you
outside
change?
though, I would change Savage though, just a
Sure.
Euripides?
Jesse, what do you feel about Savage?
Yeah.
I think they just need more models.
So, yeah. So I'll talk about Savage briefly if you want, but my pick is the Vix.
No, just go ahead and do your
Yes.
pick.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do
I
it.
think
with
I
you
think
on
the
that.
Vix are way undertuned. They die way too easily, and they
Mhm.
don't deal enough damage to make putting them in the mix worthwhile. Like you can deal just as much, if not more, damage with 3 other Outcast crews that you can with the Vix, and then you don't need 2 pseudo masters with low health pools and negligible defense that just get dropped by any beater.
Well, they have soul stones to defend them. Come on.
Well, I
Yeah.
think
I just
Yeah,
Pick
part of that's
10.
people don't bring enough soul stones. You need to bring 8 or 10 if you're playing
Yeah.
Vix.
Which
Yeah,
is
that's
just too many.
Exactly.
Whoa,
Exactly.
I just
whoa,
want to
whoa,
add
whoa,
on a
whoa.
little bit.
You just
Whoa.
literally took
Whoa.
10 AP away from.
All
Yeah,
right,
like
first Longton. Let's go with Longton and have your say. Just to
Yeah, sorry. I just
As the
want to add
Vix
on
player,
because
yeah.
the Vix were my true love in M2E. I
Yeah.
played the hell out of them, as some people may or may not know. And they're almost in. I feel like they're almost in exactly the same spot. But the reason they were good in M2E is because you can alpha strike the hell out of them in M2E and do a bunch of damage and then die and lose everything. Whereas in this, they just decided to take that away and make you play Vix in a way that we knew didn't work because people tried it. I tried it a bunch, trying to make like a non-alpha strike Vix list. And it's like, no, this is just these are just laughably frail models. You can bring all the stones you want, but then you're not going to have anything else, and it's just they need to do something with that crew. Either give them an Alpha Strike, a way of like super mobility Alpha Strike, or they just need to do something to make them beefier or have other good models.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think they should move away from
Yeah.
Alpha Strikes. I think Alpha Strikes shouldn't be in the game.
I agree.
Or we're just
Right,
going to become
I think most
Infinity.
people agree with that, but
Yeah.
I mean, they are in the game.
Yeah, I like have
So
one
it's
crew
either-
about it.
either
I get
you-
that.
It's just one of the
Yeah, I mean, I would say with the Vix, what I would change is they just need to be more durable. Like,
Yeah.
they can
Just a
deal
touch.
enough. They can deal enough damage. They are fast enough. Their healing mechanic is very cool in theory, but the way that it times out
doesn't
on the
work.
table
Yeah.
just doesn't work, and they're just not durable enough. Like, if they just had hard to kill, maybe hard to wound, butterfly jump might be a little too much. But I mean, honestly, if they just had hard to kill might not be enough, but just hard to wound, just
Well,
to
what
keep
if
enemies
you-
at mostly 2 and 3 damage instead of spiking
That's-
the 4s and 5s when they only have 8
Yeah.
wounds.
That'd be rough, dude. But yeah, I think that's probably the answer.
Yeah,
You'd have
because
to,
then
like-
it plays off of their whole healing game, where
Yeah.
you have to dedicate AP to killing one of them instead of just being able to do it in passing.
I think that's probably accurate because then you also could the counter to it would be high damage, minimum masters, and I think Mach and Min 5 them so they could just two shot them. So I think that's probably, I think that's a really interesting solution. Yeah, I like that.
And finish off the question, Landon.
Sure,
think?
I've had a lot of time, so I'll start with my joke. Kalodi is literally unplayable right
Oh,
now, so they need to fix him.
Nope, you're done. Cut off. Next question.
How would you feel if they actually made the table chair a model as a April Fool's, it's just Kalodi as a chair, and that's
Oh, man.
that'd be incredible. I would
If I could
definitely
play
buy
it.
him. Yeah, if they just come out with him his alt card, it's just Kalodi's a chair.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
let's see now.
If his answer was Hamlin, I think the Kalodi answer is the same kind of logic in my mind, where it's just I'm glad they were gone from the game when 3E started.
Well, Claudia, yeah, but Landon, serious.
If I had to
serious
actually answer though, I'd probably either pick. Mei Feng would be cheating because she's technically also in Thunders.
Sure.
Sonya, I would say I've never seen on the table, so she probably
needs
needs some
help.
She
adjustment.
needs help.
I had another pick and I can't think of it. I've literally never lost a game to Wong, but we've covered that.
Mhm.
So I'd go with Sonya at the end of the day.
We're gonna get into a fight.
Okay, you won't win.
I also
Oh, I hope the U.S. food tour next year. Then, yeah.
Hey, I'm ready, and you know what?
All right.
Before that, I'll come down. We'll settle it. You can be my first. Be gentle.
Oh, pop your cherry, baby.
Be
Pop your
gentle.
cherry.
But yeah, I think that there's just something missing in Sonya, and I don't. Well,
It's called All the Models Besides Sonya Suck.
Yeah.
that's probably
even
around
Sonya.
it.
Disagree.
Thralls are fine,
The
but
Thralls are
Can't
fine.
thralls be
it feels like
4,
there's a very
6, 8?
set list Sonya has to bring when you're just theory crafting it. Because again, I've never actually seen it on the table because no one actually brings it. But that very set list of you have to bring your handlers, you have to bring your thralls because those are the good things, and then at that point in time, it feels like once you've added all of that and maybe the Dead Rider and the Guild Steward, there's not a lot of wiggle room. And at that point in time, you don't have anything that really accomplishes your schemes. And you have something that kind of only sort of kills things comparatively to something like Dashel or Perdita or,
It's the same shockwave issue, right? We have a sliding scale that just says either my things don't do anything because you cheated out of it and it didn't matter, or you actually can cheat out of it. Now I have damages that ignore all of your defensive traits. So it's it's very binary and it's not actually a gradient, which is why shockwaves are pretty terrible. They should just be put it down, do the damage, right? I made the target number, it happens, and then we kind of go from there, and then just nerf the hell out of all of them, right? Make them 1 damage for the vast majority of them and an effect, right? I put fire on you. I put that's probably what it should be. Since it's already a binary, you just create a raw binary anyways, and then you don't have this weird gameplay system where it's either way, no player's having fun, right? Because if I'm the shockwave player and I'm Sonya and I'm cool, I put all these sweet shockwaves down and you cheated out of them, I'm not having fun because I did nothing. alternatively, if I put all these shockwaves down and you can't beat them, you're not having fun because you have no interaction.
I feel
Oh,
like
that's
the
good.
critical issue with shockwaves to me comes
I
from the
know where you're
fact
going.
that you actually have the simple duel on your opponent's end. Like if they actually
Right.
always had to make a choice, then you know Browbeat may not be the best card, but there are situations where like I'm not upset to
Yeah.
play Browbeat in my deck. Whereas the fact
Right.
that sometimes Browbeat you cast it and then the opponent just says, "Oops, that got countered," and I
That'd
didn't
be
spend any
pretty.
resources.
If they just made it a true Punisher mechanic, right, where you put a shockwave down and it's like I flip the toughness. You get to pick whether you're on fire or you take 1 damage.
See that I'm okay with.
That sounds actually better. It's still a Punisher mechanic, so it's inherently very weak, right? It's always weaker than both the options combined, but
Sure.
I would
But,
be a
you
lot
know,
happier
the
with a
third
raw
option
Punisher.
of nothing happens just is what I
Doesn't
think ruins
exist.
the mechanic.
Right.
I think otherwise, if I'm trading resources with you, the mechanic feels fine to me.
That actually sounds really sweet. I'd be down for that, especially if they put that for Wong. Like if it's like, okay, I hit you with this, you take an injured or 2 injury, or like 1 damage, right? Like pick
Yeah.
one.
All right.
That'd be
so,
pretty cool.
So let me put in my shockwave since
Yep.
Wong's king. So shockwaves are something completely different than what I mean. Maybe it's like what my group sees. My group sees is the same thing as terrifying. If somebody has a low terrifying and somebody attacks that model, then they're flipping a card. So it's a terrifying 11 on most of them, right? So it's a low 6
Yeah.
or 7 or whatever. So somebody flips a 13 and they're like, hey, guess what? That 13's off your deck. So if I throw 2 shockwaves at you and I'm splitting them up and I hit at least 3 or 4 models, then you're flipping all those cards. You pass them with severes, great. Those severes are off now. You flip it with weaks, then you have to cheat a card because most of the time I'll nickel and dime you. I am not throwing shockwaves to try to kill. I am
Right.
throwing shockwaves to bend to discard your cards and to maybe possibly make you flip your red joker, and then your red joker is gone. Unless,
The difference though is that you're making a decision and spending AP versus your opponent having to interact or get over this hurdle inherently first. And so like if I have a model with I don't even think there is anything like this, but let's say a model of terrifying 10, I would value that because you are the one who's just spent an AP that may or may not be invalidated versus me having to spend an AP that may or may not be invalidated. The difference is the onus is on you as opposed to on me, and that makes a really big difference.
But like I said, if you are trying to use shockwaves to murder, then that is a mistake. You have to use it to try to burn resources. I have many times made my opponent burn their entire hand because I threw multiple shockwaves. 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage is going to hurt somebody, and they have to spend those resources. And it's not just 13. I'm targeting my own models. Targeting my totem is a 17 move duel. So if I want to almost guarantee 2 damage Rooster Riders will pass with decent cards, but everything else is flipping 12s and 11s to pass 2 damage. And I'm not just going after one model. I'm going multiple. So everybody has different play styles. So all 9 of us are not going to play Maw the same. Well, take that back. A lot of people were playing the Oliver Maw list.
Yeah, most of them are going to play it my way.
Everybody had
not
Maw's
anymore,
list.
but before,
No,
it was my way or the highway.
I
Yeah,
used
pretty
I
much.
used Maw completely different. I used her as a beater. The focus thing was great, but I like my stuff spread out a little bit more. So I don't like net lists. Net lists are horrible for the game, and they won't work. I know there's been many podcasts, like the Guild podcast, the last one, the Dashel. If you try to play a net list, you will almost lose every time. You could have the best list, but different opponents, different terrain.
So I
If
guess
it was
that's
all static, then yes,
Well,
it could work.
Well,
that's probably a really good topic. Like,
we'll
what is
pause
the
on
value
that.
of net lists versus other
we'll
things?
come back to it. I got a
that's
whole
fine.
questions we got to go
toss-
through.
Yeah,
can I
let's
just
move
toss
on to
my
the other
master.
ones.
I never got to pick my
Yes,
master.
Andre.
Oh
do you-
yeah,
Oh, sure.
Andre, we're on.
Sorry, man.
I was
Holy shit, I forgot about Andre.
I'm sorry. I was
It's just
trying.
something about Nikima. It's something about
Yeah.
Nikima. We can
Yeah.
pass it.
Andre, let's go.
Real quick, I wanted to pick my master that really needs help as
Yeah.
Perdita. I think that her
Yeah.
crew keyword is really
Yes.
squishy and terrible. And the thing that I would do to try and maybe make her a lot better without changing how the crew feels is make bravado a direction of Perdita's choice rather than directly towards an enemy.
Okay. I
so
like it.
that way I don't feel as bad for my entire freaking crew having 2, 4, 5 as their damage track base. And also I don't have to jump into the enemy's mouth in order to shoot my guns.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would be the change I would make.
The dabbler and Perdita, I harshly disagree, but okay.
Why so?
I think her crew accomplishes exactly what it needs to do. It's a little card intensive if you go overboard on the I'm not Spanish.
El Porel, I think.
But I think the only thing she needs is a bit more of a reliable way to gain +1s, as opposed to she's got cycling on her ultimate and the totem will +1 her, referring to the hand, of course. But she's not like a straight up murder crew. She's more of a scheme around you while still maintaining some sort of output crew, because you can get a lot of AP focused in different areas of the board, leveraging Alporel correctly. And when push comes to shove, you can get a lot of damage done in a Perdita activation from very far away. There's something that I think a lot of factions lack and can be valuable in a different number of situations.
I think there's a very real space where a master can be playable and fine and fun, but in the context of a game, based off of what the other masters you can and can't take, they can become unplayable.
Sure,
Right,
like Dashel.
Right. Like Dash, like if you tell me that you think Perdita is value added to the game, I might not disagree. But if you tell me that you want to take Perdita over Dashel, I'm going to tell you you're wrong most of the time. Which is like obviously just a meta dependent thing. That's why net lists do work and they are value added to the game, because they help the not the masters, but you know what I mean. The creators curate what should and shouldn't go up and down.
Sure.
And
all right, Brian, we gotta
let's move to the next question.
And that actually leads me perfectly into this. This has been bouncing around the
Gotcha,
chat and everywhere. How to beat Levy, because we've already talked about, like Outcast as a whole, it's like, well, I could do, but I'm gonna play Levy instead.
Play 10 Thunders or Rezzers.
Play 10 Thunders. But Andre, since you haven't gotten time much, I'll go with you. I'm curious because I know I have found Nekema against Levy to be like very one-sided for Levy. So that's been my experience personally.
I donkey stomp Levy. What are you talking about?
Okay, I mean, hey, then,
So, no,
then how do you beat Levy then?
Okay,
People
so
want to know because Levy's the most broken thing in the game.
Texas guys got
I don't
guns,
agree with
man.
that
Better watch
statement.
it. Texas
Holy
guys got
smokes.
guns.
I don't agree with that statement though.
All right, let
Levy's not
Texas
the most
go.
broken.
Come on, Andre.
So
on,
the
Texas.
best way to run down Levy, as you picked out Nekema specifically, is to use your extreme mobility, because Nephilim have it, to hunt down his totems first.
Yep.
And then beyond that, Levy's favorite way to deal damage with his 1 plink damage trigger when you smack him provokes black blood. So he slowly melts to death as he tries to stop you from killing him. And Nephilim, for the most part, have the regen to make it work. Obviously, you have to kill Marlena and decide where the Ashen Core is going to drop when you kill Ashes and Dust to play around the anti-heal auras. But for the most part, I've never had a problem dealing with Levy as the Nephilim.
Sure.
Especially since his big chunky damage comes in with the melee attack, and matures can just, oh, well, I dodged it. And so for Nephilim specifically, I actually think it's a really favorable matchup for the Nephilim, especially because, his actual scheme runners, the Necropunks, in my opinion, are real scary in Rezzers, but not in Outcasts, because I see Grave Spirit's Touch put on them all the time, and that makes them really annoying to deal with. But in Outcasts, like Terrifying Levin's kind of bad, I guess, but for the most part, you'll eat them, and then he doesn't have the mobility to do anything, and then he gets bogged down in a fight he can't handle.
Sure. That makes sense to me.
For Nephilim specifically, I think Levy's an easy opponent to best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shots fired.
Landon, where are you at?
All right. So earlier I gave out the very obvious answer of play Rezzers or 10 Thunders because you've got anti-demise abilities.
That's what I would say as well.
I think to Andre's point, if you can find anything that's pretty mobile and pretty killy, there's a decent number of answers to it. I know I've tried playing Marcus in the Levy before. That ended up going pretty well for me, regardless of whether you're Arcanist or Neverborn. You can definitely run around there and get those waifs down. But even beyond that, if you can get Levy to the point where he's taking ranged attacks instead of melee attacks, as Andre mentioned, that's where a lot of his big damage comes in. And like 2-3-4 Irreducible is good, but it's not going to be backbreaking.
Right.
What I say.
Hingle, what do you have to say about Arcanist dealing with Levy? You played a lot.
Yeah, I've played Levy a lot. A lot of it's Tony, to be blunt, but there's a versatile model you guys might have heard of called the Soulstone Miner, who's pretty damn good at finding and hunting down waifs. So that either pins them back in their deployment zone, where he's not popping up in convenient places, and he's got to use AP to get back into position. You've got things, that give out, cover. Or not cover, I'm sorry, concealment. Yeah, with all the vent steam that you can find within the faction, right? Which takes away one of those positives at least. And keep him as a shooty guy. I agree. Was it Andre who said that? Is keep him as a shooter or Landon? I'm sorry.
Yep. Everyone says that.
Yeah, keep him as a shooter, and you can really mitigate a lot of the issues there.
I actually
his crew. The biggest thing is he's got a good crew backing him. I talked about McMorning, where it's like him in a flesh construct, and that's it, right? You got Rusty, you got Ashes, you got the Necropunks, you got a whole crew back in Levy. I'm less worried about Levy and more worried about the crew.
Yeah. I would chime in there and say that Levy's strength, I don't feel like lies in Levy. I think it lies in the crew, because he's literally got a crew of all stars. Like every single model in his keyword is amazing.
Deso engine.
Well, okay, maybe not the Deso
The
engine.
sculpt is
okay.
really
Those are
S tier
freebies,
though. The sculpt is S tier though.
Yes.
There's some great memes you can do with Deso engine,
Well,
as one of our friends found.
But they're memes.
They're good memes that win games.
I mean,
but
my question to Kyle, who also plays out against Levy a lot. I mean, as an Arcanist, how do you deal with it?
I mean, I go the other route. I keep him in melee and stun his ass and distract him. And I play a lot of Clet. So Clet just and just occupies.
Hate it.
Yeah,
and then the rest of my crew wins the fight while Levy's occupied. Because Levy's the only thing I get scared about, because I have tons of armor, and he's the one thing that gets around the armor. The rest of his crew doesn't, and they just get mowed down by the armored stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
that's interesting. Well, I mean, so this speaking of metas, where I go Tony and you go Hoffman, who play very similar roles within the Arcanist faction. I go because I like the card efficiency of the positive flips on defense, willpower goals on defense, and you go armor for it. So I think that's more of a meta choice.
That's in Clet's heavy armors. I'd go with the duet and the double Choraphy list and that sort of thing. But if we want to throw it to, somebody specifically asked who's the best one in Bayou. So let's just go with Chris, because we haven't heard from him. What do you suggest if you're facing off against Levy and Bayou? Who do you think are the best matchups?
So the best matchups, you mean the best counter to
yes?
Levy
Who would
Bayou?
you bring in? Yeah.
And you knew you were playing Levy.
If I knew I was playing Levy, for sure. See, every time I play Levy, I was doing either Ulix or I was doing my Wong. But Ulix is just so quick. So the thing is, what we all agree on is you got to take out the waste first.
Yeah.
And also what I always like to do, because with Ulix, I took Stampede, and Ulix is basically an obey Beastmaster. And I would Stampede into Levy, waifs, everything, because if you knock down Levy so much that he can't really afford to keep on hurting himself, you got to knock down that a little bit, and also go after the waifs as well, make him burn cards. So the reason why I say Wong is because I had a certain build that was almost static, and it was 2 taxidermists and a Pigapult. So taxidermist would go 18 inches down the board, and I can go after anything. And until it got FAQ'd, because it was kind of half and half when the person landed, if they had to do the duel for the shockwave. So the taxidermist would start out fast, gain slow, that'd cancel out, and then it'd be fast again. And I had 3 AP and Inferiority Complex, where I had Bully, so I could give myself my first crit, and my taxidermists were min 4 damage with critical strike, burning glowy, and all that stuff. So I really liked my Wong, and the two taxidermists would go waif hunting, and they'd rip apart the waifs. And if one of the taxidermists died, okay, whatever.
Very
And
true.
then I had Rusty getting obeyed by Bakors because I was burning your cards by making you do the shockwaves. And I would shoot, Rusty would shoot Levy or shoot the waifs. So basically, I like obeys for days. That's how you beat Levy. When Rusty could move 6 and all that stuff, you just shoot Levy and you kill the waifs, and then Levy just try to hurt Levy, where if he has to teleport to another waif, that's one less of his 2 lives or 3 lives that he has.
I think I would probably play either Zareta or Zareta just to obey Rusty because she's such a strong piece and just kill whatever.
Kill Levy with Rusty.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you can either take that or you can play Somer and then use ricochet tricks to try and just kill the waifs while not targeting them. Or you can play Ma and just bring Raimi and then just snipe the waifs off the mat. Yeah. I think the trick there is you basically pick what schemes and strats are easiest to do, and then you pick whichever master handles those schemes and strats the easiest out of that like context, and then you go from there. I think Somer is probably the one I would lean towards the most because if they're infinite killing, like they can just crunch your models. Well, I can just bring them back. It's not really that big a deal. Sure. And all my models are defense 6 and 7 and 8. So if they're trying to shoot people on like attacks, like if they're just gunshotting people, okay, well I have concealment or auto cover if they're around Lenny, and a lot of the times I'm defense 7 or 8. That's like you're not really getting through it, dude. Like you're not hitting my models. And then you have skeeters to also like occlude stuff. You can just run skeeters into people and like focus move, scheme with them by using a crier to obey them turn 1, and then turn 2 you just walk charge into something as long as they're under Lenny's aura. Like, okay, well now I have a focus model with defense 7. You're not hitting it once, so that's a minimum 2 AP action to try and like get through this. And if for whatever reason Somer's in that aura too, like now I just have like infinite cards to try and beat you on a simple flip. And if I don't have anything in hand or I don't have access to buy you 2 card, I can just cheat from my hand. Like basically just like crushing their AP activation and like making it so all their actions don't matter. Because I mean, when you have models like the Windy Boy, like he's not, like, he's really strong, don't get me wrong, but like if I can just put a skeeter on him and make it so that way he can't ever get away from the skeeter, then there's a lot of like really awkward positions you can put your opponent in, or you can just like summon Bayou Gremlins and drop them like next to people. Like, oh no, you have things that punish me for attacking your models. Okay, cool. So you killed my model, Pig Eating Grin, discard a card, trigger, shoot your dude for free. Like, thanks. Like you have a lot of tricks there. I think that's probably my go-to.
Yeah. We'll finish out with Guild and then we'll move on to the next question.
So yeah, just as a quick note, now this is a matchup I haven't played, but in theory crafting, again, I'm just theory crafting a lot of Guild since I haven't gotten games in with them quite yet. But I think this is where Bass actually comes into play. It's like one of the few times I think he has good play because you actually have such forward positioning that you can turn 1 start shooting down waves, and he's just all of a sudden being like, crap, I gotta actually be really careful with where I put everything because he's basically shooting from the midpoint line already into me. And I think that's where you actually have play. And as long as you have like traps defending your gun line and you're throwing out the dust clouds, like Ashes and Dust is probably the only model that is going to have an easy time just zipping past all of that stuff that you have to worry about. That I think it's a good enough matchup that's I think the way I would take it at least. But yeah,
do they have anything in their keyword to take on Ashes and Dust easily?
There are ways to deal with Ashes and Dust. One way you can do it, and this is a funny way that I've done it now. This was with Sandeep. I literally just surrounded his ass and killed him. And it's like, oh, you can't place anything. He goes away because you can't place it.
And Ashes is much easier to kill now, at least Pop, because he lost the Incorporeal. He's not nearly as good as he used to be.
Yeah.
But moving on, I'll toss this up to Jesse first, because I know you like Brewmaster. Which is the most, or what is the most underrated condition in the game, and how do you capitalize it, and why do you think people aren't using that condition effectively?
I think and this is kind of there's a little bit of a caveat to this, but
Sure.
staggered at range is so brutal.
Yep.
It is
Very
so
much
brutal.
so.
Staggered in melee has play against certain crews. It's really good. But dude, the thing that I worry about when I see Hans on the table is him
Yep.
staggering me from, sniping range. It's ridiculously good. I mean, you're basically taking a model out of the game for a turn.
Mm-hmm.
It's right up there with like 2E Trixie gremlin luring you away from her twice, putting you back in the corner of the table, just taking your model out of the game. It's really, really powerful.
My favorite
Okay.
thing I've ever done in 2E was I was playing Manos against Wong, or it wasn't. I don't even know if it was against Wong, but it was against the Pegapult, and then just shooting the Pegapult and giving staggered to everything within 3 of it with Manos' trigger, and then it just goes, I throw. No, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, Manos is probably one of the best examples of handing out staggered at range because he can do it in a pulse with no resist. It is so
It's
brutal.
insanely good.
It's weird that that's on his card.
Yeah, it's
Built
kinda
in
ridiculous.
if you want it.
Stuff like
built
that
in.
shouldn't exist.
Yeah, it really
Like, you
should. It's super powerful.
Like you should like any time I do something and my opponent doesn't have the opportunity to interact with it, it's a negative play
Mhm.
experience, right?
Very much
Like
so.
if it, like in my last international game, the reason I won specifically was because I blew up one of my models with Make Me Proud, and my opponent's like, okay, cool, what's my flip? And I'm like, you take 2 damage. There is no flip.
Mhm.
Now I'm gonna go ahead and pig and grin you. So like those kinds of interactions just shouldn't be in the game.
So any other conditions that people think are underrated that they want to throw out there?
I think people don't use injured enough. I guess the question is like, what do people think is the best condition in the game, and then work backwards from there.
That's fair.
Like, I think
is my favorite condition in the game.
Because
Because
injured's my favorite condition in the game, and I don't think people use it. I see on like forums and stuff and like weird plays, people are like, injured doesn't really do anything. I'm like, well, you don't know what you don't know what you're doing. You're not a good player, so clearly there's a
timing issue
here.
though. Is
right?
Yeah. The timing is very important with it.
Well, and that's 90% of Malifaux, right? Like if I kill your model before it activates, I just bought 2 AP. So like, but people don't get that. They're like,
Old injured was a nightmare. It knocked down all of your stats.
Mm-hmm.
Injured, that was freaking sweet.
Yeah, I'm glad that doesn't exist.
So hardcore. Yeah, I am super happy when I don't have a 0 melee.
Yeah, I mean, injured is literally probably one of the biggest reasons that Mad Dog is so good.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I mean, if he didn't hand out injured 2 on his cigar.
Yeah.
I think just even injured 1 is like really strong. I think that's the thing I think that people underplay. They try and stack injured in a lot of ways to try and make it like super value. But if you just ping someone with injured 1, you're winning most of your fights.
Yeah.
And you can now kill that model with models that are punching below that would normally be below their weight, like taking and doing damage to that model. Other than that, I think staggered is another one. Staggered is really brutal. I definitely agree there. I think slow is not used enough. I think Will-O-Wisps are one of the best control models in the entire game. Specific in the Grootslang, same kind of logic, because when you slow a model and then hook it in a 2-inch melee, that model is dead for the turn.
Yeah,
it cannot do anything. So I think economy, the same kind of thing. Like when you're combining 2-inch melees with slows, I think you're producing some of the stronger control models in the game. I'm a very strong control player. I'm always going to play the game from that lens. And so when I look at things like that, those are the biggest things. And melee as a whole, right? Like, because when you disengage, you are applying an attribute to yourself that you cannot, and a condition to yourself that you can't scheme the rest of the turn. I think like the unlabeled or the unknown condition that exists there, I think is probably hyper underutilized. For those of you who've played against me or watch me play, like I will tag something in melee with you all the time, right? Like I have a model and you have a model that you really want to scheme with or you want to take an action with. I'm going to hook it in melee because I just ate one of your AP at a minimum, because you have to either kill my model or you're having to activate your models out of activation to kill that model. So the disengage condition, I think, is probably like the hidden answer there for me. Outside of like, I think injured is probably, everybody thinks injured is good.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, injured.
Think about it. Think about injured and just injured 1. that most models that are, say, defense 4 are hard to wound or armor 2, right? If you take your standard model to, those are some serious
defensive abilities, right?
Yeah, and you just take the model to injured to defense 4 or willpower 4 or whatever and go at it. It's a big deal, and it's one of those inflection point, I think, stats.
Yeah, I think there are not a ton of crews that can really capitalize on injured the way that like Ma can.
Right.
But I think Ma is a good example of why injured should really be capped at 2. Because she can incidentally stack models up to like 5 and 6 injured. And all of a sudden your defense 1. And literally even her stat 4 totem can hit you reliably every single time.
You think that's stupid now? Granted, I know Hamlin has his long-term issues, but talk about somebody can stack a crap ton of injured, and all of a sudden, you're like, oh, this obedient wretch, if it lives, you can't cheat against it. You're a stat 1, and you have 10 blight on you. Take 10 damage from a 5-point model.
Right.
Well, Karis is, in my opinion, one of the more underrated models, and
Karis is very good.
And crews in general.
She's solid.
Her giving out injured is just brutal. I've routinely gotten people down to like defense 1 or 2, and then injured comes in 2 stages besides just lowering stats, so it's easier to hit them in the first place. I mean, the thing most people don't think about is lowering that stat just by 1 means people are less likely to cheat for ties. They're less likely to cheat in general, and now you're hitting at inherent plus flips without focus or anything because they're just not willing to commit cards anymore.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, you're also stacking burning on them. So now they have a choice.
They're
going to take, if they're facing Karis, they're going to take whatever model in their faction. They're going to have to take that can clear conditions. But now they have a choice. They can clear the injured or they can clear the burning, right?
Right. I think if Sandeep didn't exist, we would see Karis a lot more. But Sandeep is a hyper choice, so like, he's a tier S model, so like
he's the best in the faction.
Yeah, exactly. So the same reason like Somer is the same reason all the summoners are. Summoning is inherently not balanced. So
don't even get me started on the fucking.
We did like 2 full days on this. Don't get him started, please.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is that like you have these contextual decisions that will like knock someone out even though they are like I think we all agree that the second Sandeep is nerfed, Karis will see a lot more play.
Mm-hmm.
Flying, run and gun. Flight, run, and gun.
That is
the
but her melee moves models too.
And her henchman. Her henchman is just so good. That guy is insane.
The whole crew is bananas.
Which one?
Karis's crew.
Carlos. That's also a select henchman.
Okay. Another question. I'm going Landon then Andre on this. With Explorers being announced, we know November roughly is when they're coming out.
No spoilers
Hopefully
if
later.
you know them.
Yes, if you know anything, don't say anything.
I won't say anything.
But Landon, you're a McCabe player.
Oh yeah.
So I'll start with you on this, and then I'll pivot to Andre. Are you concerned about the power level of McCabe currently? He's at half a crew, he's already insanely strong, and presumably we're going to see the other half of his crew arrive November, December, January sometime. Is that a concern that he's going to become too powerful for the game?
I'll lay this right on the table. Starting off, the number of Wastrel crew models I play in a McCabe crew probably is 1 to 2 most games. I don't think that adding Wastrel models that are viable to McCabe is going to create any issues whatsoever. If anything, it will make me feel better that I'm not just dropping 2 samurai with From the Shadows on people every game, right? I think adding more models, even if they're more powerful than my existing options, is just going to create better games for my opponents because it gives me a different way to play the crew.
Okay. Andre, your thoughts on that?
I'm not really worried about what and I'll try to speak as not beta testery as possible. But
right. You know nothing about what the new stuff. Right.
Right. Yeah. I have no clue.
No clue. But Explorers, what are those?
Right. But with that understanding, the minion options that McCabe already has in 10 Thunders, because obviously he's not going to show up with, a bunch of ruffians and be like, yeah, I got him. But if the third and fourth time you see a Jirogamo with the blade on him,
The
you're just like,
lightsaber.
oh my god.
Mm.
So there is nothing that they can justify to themselves creating in Explorer Society that will make better use of McCabe's upgrades than the stuff he already has access to.
Mhm.
Sure.
And because there's no way we're going to come out the other side of the Explorers release and be like, well, leave those Drogamo and Samurai on the shelf because there's this new thing in town. Like, it's just not happening.
Mhm.
So oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish.
Oh, I was going to say the things that I look forward to is not the minions that he'll try and throw in your face to make you angry, but more so the henchman and enforcer grade models that he's looking for that he doesn't really have.
Yeah.
That will provide a different play style for McCabe without just completely gutting what he wants to do with the rest of his stones, because I think that's really the problem. Like outside of a couple matchups, it doesn't really feel good to bring Sadir into a lot of things. Desper, I would say, is more universally applicable. That's got a really nice kit, but there's that other slot of like bigger henchmen or whatever, or even a support henchman that
Just like
McCabe's
named
really
people.
missing. Yeah, that he's missing and wants to have.
So
And
I
think that's what
I guess from there to like open it up to everyone, is that just more indicative of a problem with 10 Thunders as a whole? And I know I'm biased. I'm very vocal about
Levy.
I have issues with 10 Thunders, but 10 Thunders just has a great kit of versatile models, or out of keyword taxed models. I need this great model. There's no downside to taking it. It's not a tech piece in the traditional sense of most other factions. So is that like the larger problem with McCabe? It's not actually McCabe himself. It's that
it's McCabe himself.
It's definitely
Well,
McCabe himself.
So
probably
there's two aspects to this. I think part of it is McCabe, the actual model, right? Like he can run people over. He triggers a bunch of different things that you have to interact with in a single action point. I'm going to attack you, then I'm going to run you over with my horse, and then I'm going to trample or whatever. It's like 2 or 3 things. You have all of that that's going on, and then the samurai are hyper egregious as a model. I think a lot of it could be adjusted by reducing, like basically just creating a space for samurai to actually be interacted with, because From the Shadow, even without From the Shadows, but with From the Shadows, they can't be attacked at range. They have armor 2. If you try and put a model into melee with them, they have armor piercing, so you can't just stack or like hold the line with them. And then of course they also have healing as well as armor. So if you actually try and attack them down and your opponent's not an idiot, they just activate them 2/3 of the way through the turn, Juggernaut, pop back up, and then clear from there. They can charge through, so they kill any model with hard to kill that's at 2, and then just attack it. Like, I mean, those models are probably the most egregious thing in all of 10 Thunders, in my opinion, because they're in every single crew. Right, at least that's my take.
Sure.
You also have the whole, and that's not even touching the fact that they have a gun, which ignores cover and concealment by the fact that it just inherently is a positive, right? Or they can bake in their own focus. So
Tanuki.
I think, right, yeah, and then they also have Arcanime to try and help them. They have the Tanuki to help them. Like, you have all these different things that also support those models. I think that they basically are the Arcanists from GG0 at this point. They've always been there. They've always been in that place. But Arcanists were really loud because 40 to 60% of their crew was the exact same thing every game. And now those models have been adjusted, so they're placeholders for specific purposes, right? You're not seeing someone bring miners every time. You're not seeing someone bring swarms every time. They're just really good when they're good in the situations. I think we just need that lens put on 10 Thunders.
I think Thunder's versatile models need to go down a little bit. I am a Thunder's player as well, but I'm saying if you give Lone Swordsman a home where he's not versatile, and then same thing with Samurai. I don't know who the hell Samurai would go with, but
Master.
Give him a keyword, and it'll have that extra tax. I mean, a 9 cost Samurai.
Give him to the Vix.
Give him the Vix.
Yes.
Vix needs something.
I think that would actually really help their crew if you gave them to the Vix. And they're themed. You got the whole Ronin already.
Jesus wept.
Ronin just became hired by a master. They're no longer masterless.
Oh my God.
I would be all over that.
Yeah, let's not create that.
I'd play Vix then.
other
Yeah,
angle,
so
I'll
would
just
I,
blunt
dude.
disagree.
Yeah.
Everybody
Hey,
would.
you wouldn't have the 10 Thunders upgraded. You couldn't from the shadows them. I mean, honestly.
They don't
Right.
need that though.
That's the
Yeah, they
point,
don't
though.
need
If
it.
you
That's the
remove
point.
No,
from
they
the
don't need
shadows
it.
from Samurai, I think they're perfectly reasonable 9-stone models.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree. Like, if you remove from the shadows, you remove the 10 Thunders upgrade. I think they're just they turn from an always include model that you're talking about to the same thing as the Swarm nerf did to the Swarms. It's just now you
So make them
sometimes bring them.
enforcers.
And
Make
you
them
want to
enforcers.
complain about every
you gotta do.
single list having versatile
Maybe
models and
enforcers
10
would work,
Thunders?
too.
The only 10 Thunders models that are versatile I think I've ever actually taken more than like 1 or 2 games and thought are good are Samurai and the Waynudo. Like,
Yes.
And
Hey,
there
look.
aren't other good 10 Thunder versatile models. You can fight me on that.
Flame and
I
wheel.
think Lone is good in context, but I agree he's not an auto take. Like
Right.
he needs a slot, and when that slot is there, he's great. So I
Sure.
don't really see a place where you nerf him. I do think Juanito and his Samurai are really just the egregious point there. I think if you could even leave the From the Shadows, just put him armor 1. Let's just like do that and then see how it shakes out after the dust settles. If you really want to just put the nail in their eye, just take Juggernaut away. You know, I think that's not apocalyptic. There's a ton of healing in 10 Thunders already. Just don't give the whole entire kit and caboodle on the same model, in the same activation, in the same moment. Like,
Sure. Jesse, it looked like you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I was basically just gonna say pretty much what the other guy said, which is
Concurrence,
that
sure.
the problem with 10 Thunders is that they're out of keyword, and versatile stable is just
Mhm.
leagues better than most other
Everyone.
factions. And to Oliver's point, I think that maybe Samurai, if they got knocked down to armor 1 and then probably had a cost reduction to 8, I think at 9 stones they're
yeah, it'd be
not
fine.
good enough
I'd be happy
at
with
armor
that.
1. Yeah.
I'm fine reducing point costs of models if models are simpler, right? Like I want a low powered game. I mean, I've talked about this before, right?
Oh.
I would much rather have Malifaux be half, like if you take from 2nd edition to 3rd edition and then do that again from 3rd to 4th, I think the game would be dope, right? So I'm always down for making stuff worse, especially if you're making it cheaper too, right? There's a lot of crews in a lot of factions that they build all these models and they're just playing 6 and 7 point models and above, and they don't really have a place or a purpose to take 5 and cheaper because the big models are just too good, right? Like, and so if you make those weaker and then lower those point costs, I think the game becomes really cool. I mean, the game's already really good, right? Like you can get in a place where you compare Malifaux to Nirvana Malifaux, where it's like achieved, Dharma, and it's perfect, right? And you're in this place where you're like, man, it's not that, I'm so angry. But when you compare it to 40K, it's not dog shit. So we should probably be pretty grateful. So maybe that's just me. I don't know. Who knows?
Get good, noob.
I don't
Get good, noob.
know.
Yeah, that's all you
All
gotta
right.
do is get good.
Yeah.
Q&A questions. We got some other questions.
Okay.
That we
Oh,
would-
we're part of that, so.
Specifically, Jesse, you have been asked, what will you fix about Savage?
Oh, so I've played against Savage kind of a lot.
Mhm.
I think I won't say that because it's NDA stuff. So anyway,
Cut it.
yeah, I know. Yeah, okay, so I won't say anything about that. At any rate, I feel like part of the problem with Savage is that a lot of the wound pools on their models are a little bit too low.
Yeah.
Even with all the healing and damage mitigation tricks that they have, I mean, they have a lot of,
Healing.
well, yeah, it's not even really healing. I mean,
It's like healing adjacent.
yeah, it's healing adjacent. That's a good way to put it. Their wound pools are
Try
just too
playing
low,
Guild.
so it's easy to just push through those wound pools and then they just drop. That said, I do think Thune's Encase an Ice trigger or whatever it is way the fuck too good. And there's
Agreed.
absolutely no reason that it should not be resistible. Like, that is some absolute horseshit. Especially with being able to then toss that ice pillar 20 inches away so that you'll never be able to get your master back.
Sounds like that happened to you.
Yeah.
When I'm playing Savage, like all I do is try and warp my entire game plan about breaking that trigger.
Right.
Like,
Basically, so like if Thune didn't have that trigger, or if that trigger had a resist, or if it was non-master, then I think that we'd be in a different place.
The crew would
Non-master.
actually be unplayable,
Non-master.
which is
Yeah.
not good. So, and I
Right.
think
I mean, the
that's
whole-
the
yeah.
awkward place. Like
Yeah.
the crew just wouldn't function, right? Like,
Right.
and we shouldn't ever, like I was saying earlier, we should never create a crew where it only works because there's a broken model in it.
Right. I feel like the things that crew really needs are bigger health pools and more access to means to move through their own models. I think giving them ability to
Yeah.
move through enemy
Yes.
models would be too good, but they should have means to move through their own models.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That makes sense.
Obey crews against them.
Oh, it's so brutal.
Murder them. Oh,
It's
you know that
really, yeah.
Cyclops that you just moved? Yeah, I'm gonna walk him right in the valley, and then
And
You can't move
you can't get
anything.
through. You can't get
Yeah,
through.
it's really egregious. I think that like so you have to like hyper rely on the totem to try and get you out of those lock situations. But then
Right.
you want to activate your totem in certain orders. So you're just kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. He's sweet though. I've got the whole crew right next to me. I
Yeah.
bought oil paints
Yeah.
to oil paint the whole crew. Like
Nice.
I've got a whole plan.
Yeah.
I've
Friggin-
not done it yet though, because
Yeah.
it's just I'm waiting for Lysa to come out. So I ordered
Friggin'
those.
incredible sculpts. Incredible
Incredible.
sculpts.
Yeah, it's the
beautiful
same thing.
models.
The same thing like I'll say about
All right,
Explorers.
so let's move on to the next question. And this one, I believe, since I think we had this is relevant for today. So somebody asked about what was the most recent tournament game that you had and how did it end up. Well, I think we had a person that played a tournament today, Andre.
Oh, you're gonna put them on the
Yes.
spot.
So how'd that go
Team
for you?
USA.
How did the whole tournament go?
Well, how did your last
How'd the
tournament
game go? How'd the
So your
tournament
My
game
last
go?
tournament
Yeah.
game. Has Nick put you up to this? So
Yes, that I think that was him.
Cool.
Yes, that was Nick Westbrook.
cool. Yeah.
Shout out.
So he bested me 8-6. He played Masaki into my
Ooh.
von Stuck.
Ouch.
I mean, he played it really well. I'm not even that mad. The only issue that I really had is that in 4 stones and 5 cards of hands, I didn't have a face card at the start of a turn.
oof.
So that made it a little
Yikes.
harder to play. But he did a great opening move. He used a Katanaka sniper to take out the research assistant for his first activation. And that really cost me a lot of movement. And I was also running spread them out. And I was anticipating being able to toss not a bomb triggers to run that as well. So, I mean, it was a really well played game. And I learned some stuff playing Von Stuck, which I didn't think I was going to, because frankly, I think Von Stuck is a consummate apex predator, no relation to the new one coming out. But I think that it was well played. And he also played Masaki in a way that I don't normally see, because normally you see Masaki players, or at least I do in Texas, go for the throat. They're in your
Mhm.
face. They're taking out your support models as quickly as possible. But he played really back. He used a lot of Torikage. He didn't get in my face with much of anything except for Ototo to just plug a hole, and then he ran his schemes and the strategy was played really well.
That's really cool.
I like
So
that.
anybody else play one relatively recently?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yesterday?
I played one
Yeah.
this past weekend.
I played last week as well.
All right. Well, what about Landon? How did your last tournament game go?
Man, I'd really rather not talk about that. That wound is still open. But yesterday I played against
Oh.
Wong. And so this was my McCabe versus Wong game. I tell people I don't have any bio experience because I played maybe 4 or 5 games against bio, and the only thing anyone ever declares into me is Wong. So I keep thinking, I don't know how to play against Summer. I don't know how to play against, Ophelia. And then it's just Wong every time. So I was happy to see that bit of experience, but not to dive too deeply into it, but I ended up having a really good turn 1 and turn 2 with my samurai, getting rid of a lot of his tech pieces around there. And then around turn 3, I get pretty lazy and overconfident, and I turn my 3-point lead into a tie by the end of the game because turns out a fast Sammy can run a lodestone really quickly. And if you
Sammy's
are too
really good.
greedy with your cards, that Huckster, when it needs an 8, doesn't actually jump anywhere if you don't hold the 8. So a bit of a novice mistake on my part, but it was some of the greed that came into wanting to pull off some models like his Alphonse I suspected have claim jump, which did have claim jump. And then later losing that game to a Black Joker when Alphonse attacks my claim jump model. And I Black Joker my defense, so can't cheat above him. And then he scores claim jump, I don't. But it was a really good game. I appreciated it. And, my teammates pulled through, so I can't be too upset. But having that bit of overconfidence and mispositioning and maybe misallocating a few resources really put a little cooling on my head.
Toss is a thing. Toss is a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, he
Oh,
never
yeah.
tossed.
It is.
But,
I think it's actually one of the underrated
Yeah. You go that way.
abilities in the game.
You go away. Yeah.
10 inches too.
Yeah. Into a wall, and then you
I
do a
mean,
duel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even on your own models too.
Oh yeah,
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 you
yeah.
just-
Yeah.
You figure
I'd
out
assume a
what
toss is
model,
other
what
things.
one of
Yeah.
your models in any keyword can move 10 inches on an AP.
I have two models,
Uh,
Lenny and
McCabe.
Alphon.
McCabe,
Well,
yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yon Low.
Jan Low. Yeah.
Lucky
Turn
little
5.
thing.
Yeah. Or,
Teleport.
All right. So other tournament
cool.
games. You
Yeah,
said
but,
Oliver.
some
You
good
said you
games
had
then.
one.
Yeah, I had one for the international against Christian. He was playing Dashwell. It was a pretty tight game. I ended up winning it 7-5, I believe was the final score. I was playing Somer. The vast majority of the game basically evolved around him getting his totem, obviously in a position where he could benefit off of it, while using his executioners to like scoot up the board and try and hold the center of the position, center position on the board. For me, I basically focused around summoning Bayou Gremlins and Good Old Boys, and using a crier, basically a couple criers to like try and force his models out of position. The core of the game basically ended because my opponent, we started the turn. He had to throw all of his pass tokens away, and then I had one pass token from his summon. I flipped to 13, won the initiative, and he had both of his executioners in the center of the board. I had to basically get Lenny to the center of the board to score for claim jump, and I activated Somer, summoned 2 Bayou Gremlins, basically on opposite positions of the executioners, make me prouded to kill them and basically clip both of the executioners, knocking them down to their hard to wounds, and then use Pig Eating Grin to shoot with Lenny, ricochet into the other, and kill both of them before he could activate. And then I focus shot his another one of his models, and then like basically ricocheted into the guy who's got like, when he dies, you take like 8 damage or something. So that way that guy was down to 1, and I was able to like basically threaten the rest of his team from there. So that, the steward, that's what it is. And then I was basically like, he was at 1, so I was able to then basically set it up so the one Bayou Gremlin that was left shot at the steward and then killed him, and then, oh no, my Bayou Gremlin died. The Bayou Gremlin was in melee with someone else, so then I Pig Eating Grin to shoot the model that was engaged by the Bayou Gremlin. So like basically it was all just Pig Eating Grin shenanigans, plus a red Joker randomly off a Bayou Gremlin on turn 2 to just kill his totem, which felt pretty dope. I think that was end of turn 2, maybe turn 3. So yeah, Somer is like hyper broken. He needs a nerf like ASAP.
Yes,
The
thing is like, a lot of people don't know how to play him correctly. I'm trying to spread the good news so that way he can get
No,
nerfed sooner.
don't. That it's a good thing that deep dive got corrupted. I don't need to see freaking
Yeah.
Tim Summer
He's
players in
highly-
my meta.
It needs
hard to use.
Yeah, the thing is, you have this weird space where people like play him and they don't play him correctly, so they're like, oh, he's not that good. And then you have someone who does play him correctly, and they're like, why do all your models have defense 6 and 7, or defense 8 and like hard to wound? Like, what is actually happening? And then you're not using your hand because you're just cheating off the top. And they're like, what the hell is this? You're like, Malifaux.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is defense 8 really that good? I don't
It's
know.
really good.
Just-
It's really good on Georgie and Olaf because they're like, I'm gonna shoot your
fuck
model.
that.
And
Yeah,
so
shoot 7.
there was a point in the game where he had it's the enforcer who can charge and shoot. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And he went to like attack with, it was a Lone Marshal, I think.
Lone
He went to
Marshal.
attack-
Yes,
yeah,
Lone
thank you.
Marshal.
So he went to attack with Lone Marshal, and he like charged, and he could clip Lenny, Georgie, and Olaf or Somer. And like, I think I was defense 7 on Lenny, defense 7 or 8 on Georgie and Olaf, and then Somer was defense 6. And he's like, what?
Help
Like-
me out here. How are you defense 8 on Georgie and Olaf?
So you get cover. So Georgie and Olaf's natively defense 6, right?
Oh, right, cover and then Lenny.
And
Gotcha,
then
sorry.
Yeah.
Lenny gives
Okay.
cover if
Oliver's
you're within
doing it
2
right.
of him.
I
And
gotcha.
then Lenny gives the +1 to anyone who's around him. So
Cover.
like it like you create these states where they're like, haha, your models are soft, and you're like, haha, you can't hit me. Haha. Like, so it just doesn't really matter that your models are soft.
Yeah.
And then you have Bayou Gremlins who, like, when they die, you get free APs to kill people anyways. So it's like, I love the crew. It's by far my favorite crew to play, and you can lose the game yourself a lot, right? Like you're gonna, for those of you who are gonna play against Bayou, you're gonna probably not have any issues playing against a Somer player unless they're really proficient, because they can lose the game for themselves very easily in a lot of ways.
I want to know though, did you ever try the test subject inside of somewhere where you, when it was
No.
allowed that you could just kill it 3 times in the
Fuck
turn
that
and
No,
die?
it's bad. So the reason that, like that is mechanically a strong play, but the reason it is bad is because Somer is hyper parasitic. If you bring models outside his keyword, you are not guaranteeing yourself the +2 to all of your attacks.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't matter until it does, and then it's like really bad. Like you
Yeah.
need the +2 on everything.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't have a master who's able to just like have stats 7 on almost all of its attacks and then stats 7 or 8 on all of its defense.
Yeah.
That-
Well, and
yeah,
that's an
that-
interesting. We want to do we have some friends that are looking at making. Well, I know Longton's been looking at too a little bit about coding and actually running some simulations, number simulations to show like what the, because I think something that's it's a very much an oversimplification saying, oh, a plus flips +2. It's like, is it?
Not
It's
really.
not if it's on the
It's
high
not.
end. On the high end, it's
Right.
not. It's more likely what a plus flip, it's more like to
Right.
put you at a 7. That's basically the bottom line. And then if you want to go higher than a 7, it's not so much.
And when you
Yeah.
when you have that crew layered, so that way you have Lenny and Somer touching the same model with their auras. So you're like, okay, cool, I'm defense 7. And then you have access to 5 or 6 cards in your hand. You usually are only using 1 card in your hand to summon with Somer, and the rest you do not care about.
Yeah.
You're either getting free focus off Old Cranky, because almost all of the bonus actions in that crew are trash. So you either steal Old Cranky's bonus action or steal the Spithog's bonus action, and then you can either kill your models or focus for free. So it's like you get in these positions where, okay, cool, I'll just throw a card away, it doesn't matter. And so the rest of your hand is just there in case you really need to force something, and you always have the card. And if you don't, like if you don't care about it, like when I shot his totem with just a Bayou Gremlin, right? A Bayou Gremlin is a 2-point model. It does 1, 2, 3 for the shot. I flipped a ram, and then I flipped a red Joker on the damage, and just 5'd his totem. Like I didn't spend a single card doing that. I just aggressively flipped off the top.
Yeah.
And you can do that kind of stuff.
So let's kind of go around and just out of curiosity, I know a lot of times a lot of people have mixed feelings about the tiering, but I'm curious to like go around starting with all the people and kind of tell us who you think is your top master or masters, like the S tier, if you will, of your faction, and how do they stand up against the top masters of what you perceive to be the best in the game, kind of thing. So Hingle, you've been quiet for a while. Like, who is the top of the Arcanist pile for you, and how do they match up against the top end of the game?
It's Sandeep. He's a summoner, which gives him a little extra power. I do think he's the best master of Arcanist.
Agreed.
I do think he generally matches up well. You got to be a little careful on Alpha Strikes. He can be susceptible to that. But if you know how to play him, you can guard against it. At least Alpha Striking into the models that matter. But if I got to play one master in any 5-game tournament, I will play Sandy.
He's fun too, right? Like every game can be so different.
Oh yeah.
Well, you can play him different ways, right? Whether you're playing the demise thing, where you're blowing up poison whatchamacallums,
Gammon,
and doing Gammon, thank you, and doing all this damage in this thing, or you're summoning the wind gammons to go out scheme for you. the metal gamins, or you know, you bring up these pretty good, the ice golem in the metal game golem, right?
Right.
You're bringing them up to go, bang on people. You've got
Well, I think the
a
thing
good
is there's
supporting
just
crew.
no bad options. Like
Yeah.
if you can go any way with those gammon, and none of them are bad. Like they just have they're better in different circumstances.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes, then that's why I'd play. If that's the one master I'd play in 5 games, not worry about it, right? Andre was saying earlier, practice a master, play it to death, take it into a tournament. And I absolutely agree with that. But every tournament I've won, mostly, it's all 2E because there's not enough 3 tournaments, major tournaments. But every major tournament that I won, a 5 game that I traveled to, I generally played a master 4 times, and then I had this weird master set up for some weird strats and schemes that came out of nowhere. Sandeep, I'm not worried. I can take that into all 5 games.
Yep.
All right. So, Chris, is it something besides summer as far as Bayou?
Somner's top. Somner is top, and but I'll tell you the truth. Somner will murder the world, but Zip will take every single one of your ski markers, and he will beat you to death with your own markers, and he will rob you from every ski marker. So Zip is your anti-scheme. If there's 3 or 4 with basically with strats or scheme markers that you need, you take Zip. You take Zip, and that's what you take. And if you're playing against Titania, you beat her to death with her own ones. Same with Karis. You eat her ski marker, get a card, get a place, and it's a free action, and you just rob her of her schemes. So Somner, you murder the world, and you kill your own guys doing it. Zip just robs you blind from even. I've kept up with Colette.
Sure.
With
Yeah.
ski markers. Yeah. I've
What
kept her up.
about Thunder side of things? Who do you think is? And we're going to go straight into Landon, so we'll see how he compares on the Thunder side.
The Thunder side, Asami was my bae in 2E. Asami was. Masaki is good. It's too much of a flip. Shenlong got nerfed finally. Shenlong was taken way too much. I still think Asami is probably. I'm going to say Asami's king. Or queen, or whatever
she's the summoner, right?
She's the summoner.
Yeah,
the shit that comes out of her head.
I think she's
Joragumo, bring McCabe with Asami and summon some Joragumo. Throw. I'm that guy. Yeah, I know.
We know. So is the guy
I
next
see
to
you,
you,
buddy.
Yeah,
Landon-
that's what
Landon does the
Landon's
same
done to me.
thing.
Like
Yeah, it's
Landon
like-
did to me in the podcast, and God,
ignore
it's so
everything,
annoying.
Joragumo. Oh, and then Obsidian Oni with flicker bombs.
Yeah, I've done that.
I'll beat you to death, and then I'll blow up and give you 2 more damage, 2 more burning. And Reckoning is gone. So Asami went top to the list because Reckoning is gone.
So Landon, do you agree?
So I'm gonna say I still think, and I thought this in GG0, that the most broken thing in the game right now is Yan Lo. But I still would have told you McCabe's our best master. So if I had to pick 3, because I think they're all roughly equivalent in different situations.
They're really good.
You're gonna go with Yan Lo, McCabe, and Asami. I agree.
Okay.
Asami's quite good. I like her for ley lines and things where I can just jam up my opponent with Obsidian Oni. But McCabe's just the one I'm most comfortable with, so I'll play him in the most pools. He can do literally anything, and he has a couple of different patterns you can play his crew. Like, if you need something that's hyper schemy, he does that. If you need something that's hyper killy, you have Joragumo or Samurai, so your opponent still has to guess which one you're bringing into a killy pool, right?
Mhm.
So he's just got a lot of options, and it's just really hard to answer Yanlo, and he offers a very good wide kit as far as to be able to answer various different questions. Like, if you're playing an Outcast, I don't think Outcasts really have an answer to Yanlo.
He's got such a good support package that he can basically interact with any opposing
There's
team.
a decent number of factions that holds true to.
So speaking of Yanlo, let's move to Longton with Rezzers. Is Yanlo still on top for Rezzers, or do you have?
I'm going to say yes, just because I play Yanlo like nonstop for almost all the tournament games. As some of you guys know, I'm I'm a graduated law student, so I've been studying for the bar, so I haven't gotten in a lot of games of Gaining Grounds 1, but the nerfs
one
to
has.
Yan Lo did not really affect Yan Lo that much at
Literally
all.
nothing.
But there's no way you can't say that in Rezzers that one master is the top tier, because quite frankly, you have Stuck and you have now you have Riva as another powerhouse that's available, and they're all basically S tier masters, and it's honestly just like a comfort and play style, and maybe like some schemes and strategies are nice. Like there's a few funny combinations of schemes and strategies where Riva with the Grave Golem just make a lot of things unscorable, and it's just stupid. Like
she's such a weird.
It's not the greatest model Grave Golem, but for a few current schemes and strategies, it's literally just says, "Oh, you can't get those."
All right, so moving to Andre, what are your thoughts as far as Rezzers, since you have been dabbling them, and then of course Neverborn?
Well, obviously, I didn't even say Neverborn Rezzers. I said Neverborn Stuck.
Stuck is the best in this.
I think
okay.
Stuck. If I was going to make a bid for the strongest master in the game, it would be Stuck. And obviously, there will be people who disagree with me, but I think he's just got.
He's up there.
That's got it all. He schemes without even trying. He's got a lot of tank, a lot of beating, a lot of mobility. Like he's got really a loaded kit. But as far as Neverborn is concerned, I would say that our top masters, for me, it's kind of a toss-up between, even though Nekima is my love and I will never leave her, it is Zoraida and Titania are our biggest masters, I would say. For me, I've had a lot of fun picking up Zoraida recently. And the biggest thing that she brings to a match, in my opinion, is that your opponent is now constantly having to play around what they think you might do with their models. And as soon as you start mentally fatiguing your opponent with that alone, like you can start getting an edge. And then on top of that, being able to sit down at the start of every turn with a pair of ancient packs on the table and be like, all right, cool, I'm going to dictate what the first actions taken are. And they're probably going to be the least advantageous actions of any model on the table could take, is just such a big draw for me for Zoraida. On top of the fact that it also messes with like their control hand and stuff like that, because I've had a lot of players stop stoning after turn one into a Zoraida because like it's not worth it. She's just going to use Skeins of Fate. Right. So it messes with their control. It messes with what they think they have to play around into Zoraida. A lot of people will build their lists trying to stop Zoraida from just clowning with their own stuff. And so I think Zoraida is really strong for that. And then Titania, for me, she's just so tanky as a dive master. Now, personally, I play in that 8 to 10 stone range. That's where I like to play. Yep. And Titania is really good with that because with 14 wounds, life leech, the heal triggers, throwing out injured, which as we previously discussed is such a good condition to hand out.
What's your normal Titania list? I'm really curious. I've never heard someone say she's...
It better have the dinosaur now.
Yeah.
She has a dinosaur.
The dinosaur is theoretically on the menu. So my usual Titania list is Titania with Ancient Pact, the Hooded Rider, the Serena also with Ancient Pact because I don't want her to be able to black or heal. Yep. And then I bring a Waldgeist and Killjoy, and then that's it. So you've got a very, I like to play Elite Crews, and so that's what I bring.
That's really cool.
So yeah,
that sounds like a sweet list.
You throw Titania in their face, and it's really hard for them to deal with. And then the sleeper hit that I like with Titania is that when you give Titania Killjoy's Blood Sacrifice upgrade, she can use Queen's Command to bring the underbrush marker underneath herself and her intended victim. And because she took damage with that underbrush marker, it became hazardous in her own activation, and then she will just suplex you into the same piece of terrain over and over again until you die. And it's super gross. And so she's not an all-the-time food. She doesn't like, running spread them out or things like that. But when she's in her fighty, we're going to have a fight in the center. Like, if claim jump and leave your marks on the table, you can bet that Titania is going to come out.
Interesting. Do you end up taking for your Zoraida list? Because I know in Bayou the Zoraida lists are fairly different. I think Zoraida is actually one of our top masters as well. I think it'd probably be Somer and Zoraida, but I actually usually don't play her because I'm also a henchman and a community builder. So I've been banned by my lieutenants from playing her. Yeah. So, but I know in Bayou I take Groot Slaying in almost every single list. I'm curious if you bring it as well.
I basically bring Hinamatsu instead of the Groot Sling. I think there might be a similar reason as to why, but they both have Wicked. And when you obey models to disengage from a Wicked model, you control the defense and the attack, and it gets gross.
It gets really gross, yeah.
But with
not
Onslaught,
all
I
of us
like it a
have
lot
her.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bayou doesn't get Hamamatsu.
Yeah, that's probably
Goku
the
does
main.
in Thunders.
Yeah.
Like that, and then the teleport tricks you can do by attacking your own models with Groot Slang, I think are the other reasons to do it.
Yeah.
All right, though. Let's try to get everybody up and get this wrapped up by 10:30. So quickly, Brian, Outcast, since you're the one Outcast here.
I mean, it's clearly Levy. I would like to say Parker is up there in probably the strong second spot. Maybe in the right matchup, Daw becomes just oppressively, insanely strong, obviously, but it's a very hard matchup to engineer. So obviously Levy is, like, we've talked about it. Levy is clearly there, which speaks to the faction having problems, and then Levy in general having some issues that they need to fix both from both directions. Up and
bring
down.
everybody up and down. Yeah, I agree.
But
sad.
Parker's great.
All right, so Jesse, what are your thoughts on Bayou? Do you have any disagreements with the others?
No, not so much disagreements. I mean, I think that Summer he's like the hard mode S tier best master, and I really feel like and Zoraida kind of shares that same space. Like it takes a lot of reps to really get her to fire. I think is still damn near as close to the top of the pack, and she's easy to play. That's the trick.
She's got a really high
easy
floor.
to play.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing that I would add is that, like the matchup specific stuff, like the Daw thing that Brian was saying, and Oliver's going to laugh at me for this, but there are certain pools that she is the most oppressive thing that you can play against in Bayou.
Yeah, I think Ophelia needs like a perfect pool, but when she's good, she's really good. Because Ma got nerfed, Ophelia has space to actually play. I think that's why I'm so happy about the Ma nerfs. Like, I asked for them on the forums. You're welcome, everybody.
They're perfect.
But that it created space not just for Ophelia to exist, but Brewmaster, Zip, and the Ma lists actually are different now, right? Before I painted exactly the right models so I could play at Nova, and I didn't deviate from that pool for 6 months. And now I have already had to paint other models, right? Like I'm bringing Pork Chop in almost all my mod lists now. It's really cool because it makes the game a lot wider. I'm super happy for that. I feel sweet.
So Oliver, keeping it as fast and quick as possible, let's hit your top for Bayou and Neverborn. I mean, obviously we know Summer's Bayou for you.
Yeah, so Summer definitely for Bayou. I think other than that, probably Ma, just because the floor is so high. I think Zoraida is really strong, but you can't just know Zoraida. You have to know every single other master.
Yeah.
So the vast majority of people aren't going to have that capacity. As for Neverborn, I think Dreamer is still really broken. I think that Dreamer is not easy anymore. Right before, you could just walk into it and just crunch anything without really thinking. Now you have to actually consider it. I think Dreamer plus Zoraida probably shouldn't exist. And then as for secondary master for Neverborn, it's probably going to be Zoraida just because the same issues, right? But again, while her ceiling is, I don't think another master has as high of a ceiling as Zoraida. So I'm just going to put that out there. I think that if you're playing perfect, Zoraida is the best master in the game, period, without any other exceptions. The issue is no one's that robot. No one is that.
Except Alex.
I don't know. I've beaten Alex, so I don't know.
Oh.
But yeah, so I don't think that like anyone has the capacity to play that perfectly. And Alex is a great player, right? But the only person I think I've come close to is Nick, and even he doesn't play Zoraida at the level she needs. I think her floor needs to be raised and her ceiling needs to be dropped.
Gotcha. Okay. And then to bring us to a close, as far as my thoughts, I agree with Hingle with Sandeep being top dog. I think Colette's also up there. I think she can, in the right pool, she can match him straight, blow for blow. But holistically, Sandeep can go into anything pretty well. And there's some things Colette is maybe a little less good, but she still can do anything, and she's super strong. So.
I think Colette's attack crew versus Colette's like scheme crew are both like really strong. And I think again,
Well, it's the same list almost, depending on what you
well,
build.
no, I don't know. I've seen them both like be radically different, and I think
No,
they're
you
both
can.
very powerful. I think that Sandeep has the same issues. You have to be super efficient with knowing like how the mechanics of the game work, and also very proficient with your reps. Because if you're not like stacking your triggers correctly or not like layering your activation order correctly, you're not going to do well with deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like the first few games I had with them were
rough.
rough. It was rough.
Yeah, it's rough.
And then as soon once you kind of figure,
positioning, it's literally positioning. That
he is the
just
king of
deployment.
unpacking. I literally did like a document where it was like, okay, do this, do this, do this. In a perfect world situation, there was like 10 steps.
At this point, I'll do, if I have to deploy first, I'll do like the Soulstone Miner as one group, the entire rest of the Sandeep crew as the other, so I can make sure I get it right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as far as guild, I mean, it's Dashel. Like, Dashel does everything. Like, there are, I'd say maybe Recover Evidence. You could make a debate for Nelly. Or Lucius. Yeah. But Dashel can almost do it as well as them, and he does the other three better than them. So just learn Dashel.
Guild needs an absolute buff. I think that they're really in a not great. Yeah, a summoner. You said, Matt's right. Summoners are just by far the best masters.
Yeah. Like I went on a whole tirade about summoners. Like summoners should not be able to summon in something higher than 6 soulstones. That's kind of like a bottom line thing that I.
Karai sleeper best in Rezzers.
I don't even want to talk about Karai. Oh my god, she is a nightmare.
Yeah, I just played 2 games Bass Karai and they went bad.
I would actually be happy. I'm just going to put this out here in case Weird is listening. I know I'm critical of your game, but I actually love you guys. So please, I critique because I love the game so much. I would love for summoners to just start the game with 40 soulstones. I know it's a really bold choice. I know if Cody is still listening, he's probably angry that I just suggested that. We've talked about it before. But I think that you can start there, right? You use the tactical nuke, and then you adjust from there. Because how many of us are all top tier players in our conferences, and every single one of us just named a summoner who is hyper powerful once you get the reps in. A year from now, when everyone who's like not great, like they're mediocre players, has gotten the reps in because they play only 1 game a month or whatever, all of those situations are all of a sudden they're going to be a lot louder, right? So it's better to just cut the head off the snake now and do the thing that everyone's going to be angry about, and then adjust from there, or maybe even just do 45 stones, right? But I think that's probably the loudest solution we can have without just like completely warping schemes and stones around them.
I mean, I partially agree. The only other thing I'd say is most of the summoners that are bonkers are the high variance ones. But because nothing feels worse when you play against Isami and they're just like, I have the 13s for another Joragumo or
that's
Dashel
the
with the X instead of just being like consistent. You can't.
Summoners are supposed to struggle. Like they can summon these great things, so they bring in all this extra stuff, but they're supposed to struggle on the resource end to get there. But then look at your best summoners outside of probably Karai. They just generate it. Like Sandeep can draw what?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
7 cards a turn.
Well,
On average, it's like 4.5.
Andre, I'm just curious because I got in an argument recently about Shtuk. Do you count him as a summoner? How much do you feel like his actual summoning matters?
I 100% think that Shtuk is a summoner. I realize you just summon it from nothing or as close to nothing as Dashel's willing to approximate, but it's such a big swing where you're like, all right, cool. What's that 8 or 9 cost model that you really don't want to not have right now? Cool. Here is a student of Isra. And that's such a big swing. He's a win more master. But with that, the summoning, I think, is the biggest component of it.
Mm-hmm. All right, you just validated the whole argument for me.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you all for joining it. We've gone up to our 2 hours, so hopefully we can do something like this again for another big event. With COVID going on, I mean, this is like one of the best ways to actually talk Malifaux with a bunch of people at once. But again, thank you very much for all joining me, and we're going to bring this to a close. So thank you all listeners for checking this out. If you're seeing this live, thank you very much for that. If you're still checking this out post, thank you for that. And yeah, let us know what you thought. So have a good night, all.
Wong is king.
Thanks for your time, everybody.
Wong is king.
Night, y'all.